case of Suzanne Sills. On Sunday, November 13, 2016, Dr. Scott Sills, a renowned fertility specialist in California, called 911 to report that his wife, Suzanne, had fallen down the stairs. When he found her, she showed no signs of life. Scott activated the speakerphone for the call. The dispatcher guided him on how to provide first aid, and he followed the instructions while their children were nearby. He claimed that Suzanne showed signs of life after the first aid was administered. When the paramedics arrived, Scott stated that she was alive. However, the paramedics suspected that he was mistaken because she was already deceased. The police were then notified, and several officers arrived at the house. They noticed bruises on Suzanne's neck that appeared to be from strangulation, indicating that her injuries could not have been caused by a simple fall down the stairs. Scott told the police that Susan wanted to walk her dog, as she did every morning. He suggested that after she fell down the stairs, the dogs might have pulled her scarf, leading to her suffocation and leaving marks on her body. However, the police suspected that the dogs could not have caused Suzanne's death in this way, so they concluded that she had been murdered. They especially believed that Scott could be the real killer. To investigate further, they first looked at Scott's testimony. Was it possible that Suzanne fell down the stairs and suffered fatal injuries? This seemed plausible since the stairs were over 4 meters high and very steep. However, Suzanne was a 45-year-old woman in excellent physical condition and had always been careful, so a fall seemed unlikely. During their examination, the police discovered injuries all over Suzanne's body. Her face was covered in bruises, and both her arms and legs had wounds that could not have resulted from a fall. Additionally, items found near her body raised further questions, as they did not align with Scott's account. Meanwhile, he appeared surprisingly calm, even with his wife's body lying dead in the house. Despite the suspicions surrounding him, Scott cooperated fully with the police, allowing them to search his house and providing all necessary information and DNA samples. Meanwhile, one of the officers began questioning Scott and Suzanne's children. They had 2 children, 12-year-old Eric and his twin sister, Mary Catherine. Both children shared that their mother, Suzanne, had been unwell the day before, suffering from migraines, which she experienced periodically. The pain was quite debilitating for her. During these episodes, she would retreat to a dark room, lie down, and remain quiet. Next to her body was a saucepan, an item she often kept close during these times in case she felt nauseous. Suzanne would place it near her bed, and when she woke up in the morning and decided to take the dogs for a walk, she would bring it with her to the kitchen. An empty pill bottle found nearby contained painkillers that Suzanne used to manage her migraines. Her husband, Scott, described their relationship as warm, and both children confirmed that their parents shared a deeply understanding and loving bond. They rarely fought and were generally seen as very positive individuals. With information from family members, the investigators were able to piece together what happened before the tragedy. On Saturday evening, November 12, 2016, Suzanne went to sleep in Mary's room, which was the quietest and darkest place, to manage her pain. Around midnight, Scott checked on Suzanne to see how she was doing. Since Suzanne was already asleep, Mary chose to sleep in her parents' room instead. Detectives discovered a heartfelt note Mary left for her mother on the door, expressing her love and wishing her a speedy recovery. Eric said that at around 4 a.m., he woke up after hearing an argument between his parents, Suzanne and Scott. He was resting in the next room, listening to the loud and seemingly annoyed voices. He also did not hear any other unusual noises. After about 5 minutes, Scott decided to sleep in the main bedroom, where Mary was sleeping. When Scott entered, Mary woke up and asked what was happening. He explained that he and Suzanne had argued over a work-related email, assuring her that there was no need to worry. Scott later told the police that when he checked on Suzanne at 4 a.m., she was working on her laptop. He tried to convince her to go to bed because she was feeling unwell due to a migraine, but she refused and continued working, which led to tension between the two. Eventually, the family went back to sleep. They woke up at 6:30 a.m. Scott suggested to Mary that they should go swimming. However, when she came out of the bedroom, she found her mother unresponsive at the bottom of the stairs. Her mother was lying on the floor with a long scarf around her neck, and there was a saucepan nearby. Mary screamed and called for her father, Scott. Scott noted that Susan often used this scarf to wrap around her head during migraines. This scarf belonged to Mary. However, there were questions about whether the dogs accidentally knocked her down and caused her to strangle herself. Could she have fallen in such a way that a scarf wrapped around her neck, leading to her death? These scenarios seemed unlikely, and suspicious details began to emerge. For example, if she was carrying an empty saucepan with her when she fell down the stairs, why did no one hear the noise and wake up in the early morning hours? The saucepan would have made noise hitting the tiled floor and stairs, so it couldn't have fallen silently. Additionally, it was odd that she had a scarf on a warm day. The police began to suspect her husband Scott, especially since a cut was found on his forehead. Scott also had a large bruise on his arm. He suggested that he got these injuries while repairing his car in the garage the day before. According to his statement, his son, Eric, assisted him with the repairs. However, there was a contradiction. Eric claimed that his father was not injured that day. They had left the garage together and entered the house, and during that time, Eric did not notice any injuries on his father. Eric also informed investigators that he saw his mother, Suzanne, putting the dogs in a cage a few hours before her death. Normally, after this, the dogs would go to sleep. Eric was puzzled as to why his mother would take them for a walk so early in the morning, especially when she seemed to be in a weakened state. While investigating Mary's bedroom, where Susan had spent the night, authorities discovered suspicious bloodstains on the curtains, wall, and bedside table. Mary asserted that when her mother entered the room, it was entirely clean and free of blood. Scott claimed that the bloodstains were old, from cuts he had made while replacing mosquito screens on his windows last spring. However, the stains appeared fresh. Despite the presence of the bloodstains, this evidence was insufficient to charge or arrest Scott. Then, Suzanne's body was sent for forensic examination, and officers left the house after 4 days. Although the autopsy was performed, the forensic expert could not provide clear answers. The examination revealed multiple injuries on the body, which could have been caused by either a fall down the stairs or physical assault. Strangulation was also a possibility. The most severe injury was a fracture at the base of the neck. Additionally, broken blood vessels in the eyes were found, a typical sign of strangulation. However, experts could not determine for certain whether the injuries were accidental or indicative of criminal activity. A more thorough analysis of all evidence was needed, which could take months, and no one wanted to rush, given the complexity and contentious nature of the case. The forensic experts concentrated on examining additional evidence gathered from the house, particularly the blood, which appeared suspicious. They also sent traces of blood and other items, including a phone and a laptop, for analysis. The Suzanne family had limited interaction with their neighbors, as they worked long hours and rarely engaged with others. Consequently, no one could provide useful information about what was happening inside their home. Additionally, no one reported hearing anything unusual during the night or in the morning. Investigators used communication tools to gather more information. This helped them identify people who had close relationships with Suzanne and Scott, thereby finding witnesses who could shed light on the motive for the incident. They spoke with students whom Scott taught, who described him as cheerful and kind. He always attended class dressed in an elegant three-piece suit. Some students who had a lot of interaction with him said he was the sweetest person. One girl recounted how he helped her financially multiple times when she couldn't afford lunch or a taxi home due to her family's financial struggles. Scott showed her great compassion. From a young age, it seemed that Scott had great potential. After finishing high school, he was accepted into law school and later pursued medical studies. His intelligence, determination, and hard work enabled him to become a successful specialist in reproductive issues. His work led him to meet Suzanne. She came to his clinic because she was struggling to conceive with her first husband. At that time, Suzanne had just graduated with a master's degree in business administration. She shared her fertility issues with Scott, who then took charge of her treatment. Over time, their professional relationship developed into a romantic one. Eventually, Suzanne decided to file for divorce. Suzanne was witty, cheerful, and very attractive, making her a loyal friend and a wonderful life partner. At a reunion of their business school, Scott attended with Suzanne, and they appeared to be a happy couple. So, when they announced their engagement, no one was surprised. Scott successfully addressed Suzanne's fertility issues through IVF, and she became pregnant, later giving birth to twins. Suzanne admired her husband greatly. She considered him a genius and an expert who could help many women. Thanks to Suzanne's efforts and her husband Scott's expertise, they opened a clinic together in April 2015. Suzanne played a crucial role in building and managing the business, while her husband focused on the medical procedures. Through this venture, they became very wealthy and purchased an expensive house in a prestigious part of the city. Scott developed an interest in luxury cars, and the family indulged in a lavish lifestyle. By this time, Scott had gained fame as a specialist. He was recognized due to his frequent television appearances. He authored several books and regularly contributed to professional publications, earning a reputation as one of the top experts in his field. It seemed that he and his wife Suzanne worked well together. However, shortly before the incident, they experienced disagreements over a photograph that Suzanne posted on her social media. Afterward, friends noticed tension between them, especially when Suzanne's relatives and friends learned about the death and the circumstances surrounding it. Many believed the incident was suspicious. By the time detectives began interviewing witnesses, several had already met with Scott. They found that he did not want to talk about the incident, which made the investigators even more suspicious. They now increasingly believe it was a deliberate murder. During this time, forensic experts visited Scott's home multiple times. They observed that he did not express any regret and appeared to be unemotional. While he often praised Suzanne as a talented businesswoman, he rarely acknowledged her qualities as a loving wife and mother. It seemed that his affection for her was more about their business partnership than about love. The morning after Suzanne was declared dead, Scott went to work as though nothing had happened, surprising the entire staff. Everything appeared the same as any other morning, and it seemed he wasn't troubled by the situation at all. Contrary to what everyone expected, he didn't take time off to grieve for his wife. The clinic's manager and several employees spoke with detectives, noting that Scott avoided discussions about Suzanne. Furthermore, Scott quickly began to change his appearance. Before Suzanne's death, he looked like an average balding man, but afterward, he underwent a hair transplant and now had a thick head of hair. His activity on social media also increased. He maintained his personal page without mentioning any sorrow over his wife's passing. In fact, he started going to the gym, dining out, and dressing well, giving the impression that he was looking for a new girlfriend and was indifferent to his wife's fate. Soon after, Scott started dating someone, and their relationship progressed quickly. However, the police felt they still lacked evidence. They needed to gather all the information and find new incriminating details. In 2018, the coroner's office provided the results of a thorough analysis. The forensic expert determined that the cause of Suzanne's death was strangulation, which left marks on her neck post-mortem. Additionally, DNA tests revealed a mix of blood from Suzanne and Scott in Mary's room, indicating a struggle and suggesting that Suzanne was attacked by Scott. On August 8, 2018, nearly 2 years after Suzanne's death, detectives visited Scott's house and directly asked him if he had killed his wife. He became visibly nervous, sweating and adopting a defensive posture. Scott denied the allegations regarding the blood, claiming he had injured himself while fixing the mosquito net on the door. However, this raised the question of how his wife's blood ended up there. Meanwhile, Mary stated that she had not seen any bloodstains until the police arrived and found her mother deceased. Although there was clear evidence of the crime, the officers were not in a rush to file charges. They decided that more evidence was needed, including examining Suzanne's phone. They believed that social media could provide important clues. After investigating, they discovered some disturbing details. Suzanne often had harsh reactions towards her husband, Scott. About 3 months before her death, she expressed feeling trapped in their relationship and wanted to end it. After that, she occasionally told her husband that they were not a good match. A month before her death, Suzanne confided in a friend about having a difficult relationship with Scott and her desire to leave him. However, she felt he was holding her back due to their joint business. According to her friend, a photo she had posted became a significant issue in their relationship. Scott was unhappy about the photo. When the police checked Scott's phone, they found a screenshot of this picture from August 30, 2016. It appeared that this revelation became the motive for the murder, fueled by jealousy. The police discovered that the day after Suzanne's death, Scott attempted to collect a $250,000 payment from her life insurance policy. However, his claim was denied because of suspicions of murder. On April 25, 2019, nearly 2 years after her death, Scott was arrested for the alleged murder. He was apprehended while preparing for another surgery and was detained, with bail set at $1 million. He quickly paid the bail and was released, waiting for trial. Then, a woman reported to the police that she had dated Scott while Suzanne was still alive. They initially met through social media, and it appeared he was very interested in her. However, he soon ended the relationship. A woman shared a text message she received from Scott 2 weeks after Suzanne's death, in which he expressed his desire to rekindle their relationship as he was now single. There are several motives for why Scott could have killed Suzanne: to gain money, to avoid dividing their assets in a potential divorce, or simply to remove her as an obstacle to dating other women. However, Scott's attorney argued that the text messages were simply a father's way of trying to find a new mother for his 2 children. In November 2023, 7 years after Suzanne's death, Scott Sills faced trial. Cameras were prohibited in the prosecutor's office but allowed in the courtroom. Scott appeared uncomfortable with the media attention, as he had faced significant scrutiny throughout this ordeal. He lost his medical license and seemed to be struggling emotionally. According to the prosecutor's office, on November 13, 2016, Scott attacked Suzanne at 4 a.m. when their son, Eric, heard the argument. He physically assaulted her multiple times and ultimately strangled her to death. He then staged the scene to make it look like she had fallen down the stairs, and he went to sleep, pretending not to know what happened the next morning. Despite this, Scott's lawyer presented a defense, indicating that he was determined to fight the charges. The attorney stated that Susan woke up that morning, tried to go to the kitchen to get a pan, and continued her daily activities. However, due to the effects of her migraine medication and her general weakness, she fell down the stairs and was injured by the family dogs. The dogs interpreted the situation as a game, tugging on the ends of the scarf around Suzanne's neck. As they pulled in different directions, they inadvertently strangled her, causing her to die relatively quickly. In an unexpected turn, Mary came forward to support Scott. She stated that when she left her room, she saw the dogs pulling on the scarf around Suzanne's neck, but initially did not comprehend the situation. She admitted that she had not spoken up sooner because she was just a child at the time of her mother's tragic death. Mary explained that she didn't realize the importance of the information regarding the scarf. She noted that they removed the scarf while providing first aid to her mother, which is why it ended up away from the body. The defense tested the scarf for dog DNA. which came back positive. Additionally, toxicology tests indicated that Suzanne had a mixture of sedatives and painkillers in her system, making her muscles difficult to control and overly relaxed after sleeping. In the days leading up to her fall, she had poor nutrition and felt weak, which could have contributed to an accidental fall that resulted in a neck injury, potentially leading to suffocation without help. The defense argued that the dogs played only a minor role in the case. They claimed that even if the dogs hadn't dragged the scarf, Suzanne could still have died since no one heard her fall or called for emergency assistance. However, the prosecution found this explanation unconvincing, stating that the noise from her fall should have been noticeable. They believed that Scott used the scarf to strangle her. In contrast, Mary claims that her mother, Suzanne, often uses the scarf to keep warm when she has a migraine, which helps her mother feel better. However, the prosecutor's office made its strongest argument that during their search of the house, they found no evidence that Susan had been on the stairs. If she had fallen down 4 meters of steps, there would likely have been blood or DNA traces, but none were found. The prosecution argued that Scott himself moved the body to make it look like a fall. They emphasized the positioning of Suzanne's body. Although the 911 dispatcher instructed Scott to perform CPR on a flat surface, when paramedics arrived, Suzanne's leg was still on the stairs. This indicated that he was not genuinely trying to help her, but was only pretending. Furthermore, the prosecution maintained that Scott had a strong motive, as a photo posted by Suzanne had sparked jealousy and anger. The jury testified in the 3-week trial. Ultimately, they had to reach a verdict. After hearing closing arguments from both the prosecution and defense and deliberating for 3 hours, the jury found 58-year-old Scott Sills not guilty of first-degree murder, but guilty of second-degree murder. This means that Scott, a man who has helped many women, has now been convicted of murdering his wife. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Upon hearing the verdict, Mary broke down in tears in the courtroom. She was heartbroken at the thought of losing her mother, while her father would spend the rest of his life in prison. She claimed that there was a mistake in the trial and was determined to seek justice with her defense attorney, but the sentence remained unchanged. The case of Alexandra Fossmo. Helga Fossmo was born on July 27, 1971, in a small village in central Sweden. He is one of 5 siblings. His parents were not religious, which is not often the case for people who follow a faith, as they are typically influenced by their families. However, Helgi developed an interest in the church on his own. At the age of 12, he joined the youth group of his local religious community, and his parents supported his decision. They recognized his strong interest in the church and did not object. In fact, they later came to see it as a positive choice for their son. Helge describes the church as a source of salvation for him. Despite his young age, he was one of the most active members of the community, regularly attending church meetings and events. This involvement lasted for 5 years, until he began working at a Christian youth cafe in 1988. There, he met his first love, a girl named Helene. They were both attracted to each other, and their relationship progressed as they grew up. The couple eventually married and had 2 children. During this time, Helge continued to explore his faith and became a preacher in the local community. In 1993, a pivotal encounter took place. Helge met Asa Waldau, a woman who claimed to be the bride of Christ. She was the leader of a Christian sect. Asa hails from Knutby, where the cult originated, and travels from town to town preaching and gaining followers. Her main focus is on teenagers and young adults, making Helge's family an ideal target for recruitment. She consistently uses the same strategy to convince young people to leave their homes and join her church. However, their first meeting was not easy. When Asa approached Helge, a devoted Christian, He reacted harshly and expressed disbelief at the idea of a woman becoming a pastor. He found her beliefs and interpretation of the Bible too extreme for his taste. Despite this, Asa was determined not to give up. She saw potential in Helga's family and wanted to attract them to her group. Asa planned to proceed cautiously over the coming years. Asa spent a lot of time gaining the trust of Helga's family, assuring them that her community's activities were safe. At the same time, she began to influence their beliefs, especially Helga's. It took nearly 4 years, from 1993 to 1997, for Asa to convince Helga's family to accept her teachings and move to Knutby. At first, she treated it as a visit, giving them a tour of her church and explaining her work and goals in detail. Over time, Asa gained more and more attention from the family. The community she built provided jobs for those in need, and almost every member had specific responsibilities, many of which involved religious activities. This fostered a strong sense of community where everyone knew and supported each other. The residents of Knutby were a tight-knit group and welcomed Helgi and his family with open arms. Helgi resumed his previous role as pastor of the new church. It didn't take long for his sermons to reveal unconventional topics, often discussing taboo subjects like abuse and death. Some parishioners were skeptical of Helga's interpretation of the Bible. However, he persisted in his mission. 2 years after moving in, the Helgi family welcomed their third child, bringing more responsibility to everyone. To manage the increased workload, they decided to hire a nanny. After a short search, they chose Sarah Svensson, who had recently moved to the city. Sarah grew up in a Christian community and came from a religious family. Since childhood, she had struggled with severe allergies, which prevented her from living a normal life. During this time, her mother cared for her, and they developed a very close relationship. Sadly, her mother passed away after a long illness when Sarah was only 11 years old. This loss had a profound impact on Sarah, causing her to run away from home and become a troubled teenager. After her mother passed away, her father took on the responsibility of raising her. Although he had a busy job, he devoted all his free time to her. They shared a strong bond, but he could not fill the void left by her mother. Sarah stayed with her father until she happened to meet Asa while traveling from city to city for a Bible study. They quickly connected, and Sarah seemed like a good candidate to be accepted into the cult. Asa easily recognized her weaknesses and exploited them. Sarah then decided to move to Knutby to be closer to the church. During this time, Helgi grew closer to Asa than ever before. They often spent time together not only studying the Bible. The two of them received several messages from above, which they interpreted as prophecies sent by God. According to these messages, Helga was the King of Kings, and Asa was the Queen of Heaven. Asa insisted that marrying Helgi would allow for the creation of the Great Alliance, taking their faith to new heights. In 1999, a wedding-like ceremony took place between Helgi and Asa. During the ceremony, Helgi presented Asa with a ring containing 7 diamonds, a number that has sacred significance in many faiths. At the same time, Helga's legal wife, Helene, felt very jealous of the situation. This jealousy led to tension in their relationship. Asa intervened and criticized Helene for her jealousy, claiming that it was the worst emotion a true Christian could feel. She urged Helene to change her attitude, warning that the church could create serious problems for her, including the risk of losing her home. Meanwhile, the relationship between Helge and Asa became increasingly dysfunctional. Despite being married, Helge neglected his family and devoted all his time to Asa, especially after the ceremony. Asa showered him with affection and compliments, which deepened his feelings for her. Asa used this affection to control Helgi. She was subtle and effective in her approach, quickly taking control of almost every aspect of his life. Asa convinced Helga that he was the reincarnation of Jesus. These strange beliefs attracted attention and became increasingly extreme. The behavior of this unusual couple became more provocative. With Asa's manipulative tendencies, it was clear that this situation would not end well. On the morning of December 18, 1999, Helge and Helene had breakfast together. Afterward, Helge decided to lie down and rest, quickly falling asleep. While he was sleeping, he heard a knock on the door. When he woke up, he found that his wife was missing. A neighbor had come to check on him because they hadn't heard from him all day and were very worried. Helge opened the door and assured the neighbor that everything was fine. However, the neighbor wanted to see Helene, but she was not there either. He called out to her, but she did not respond, which worried Helge. He remembered that she had gone to take a bath and realized that she had been in there for a long time. Concerned, the two men decided to check on her, but Helene still did not respond when they called her name. They decided to unlock the bathroom door with a screwdriver. Inside, they found Helene lying face down in a bathtub full of water. The door was locked from the inside, and she was still wearing the nightgown she had on for breakfast. Helge screamed so loudly that he attracted the attention of several neighbors who came to his house. Together, they pulled her out of the water and attempted CPR, but sadly, it was too late. Helene was later pronounced dead at the age of 27. During the investigation, it was discovered that Helene had suffered severe head injuries. The medical examiner believed that her death could have been caused by several factors. The head injury may have caused her to lose consciousness, leading to asphyxiation. The toxicology report added further complications to the case, revealing a very high concentration of dextropropoxyphene in her body. This amount alone could have been fatal, but there was no indication that Helene had taken the drug, and its presence in her body remained a mystery. Although foul play was suspected, the police concluded that it was an accident. They believed that she had slipped, fallen, and hit her head on the faucet. The housekeeper, Sarah, played a key role in this conclusion, corroborating Helge's claim that Helene was alone in the bathroom and that no one could have harmed her. Helge appeared deeply saddened and genuinely mourned his wife's death. However, those who knew him well noticed some strange behavior. He quickly discarded all items related to his wife and seemed to forget her completely. He even forbade his children from mentioning their mother. Some speculated that Helene's death was not an accident. It was also revealed that Helge had influenced the results of the autopsy. He initially requested that an autopsy not be performed on religious grounds, but this request was denied due to the suspicious circumstances surrounding her death. He later insisted that the autopsy report not mention an opium overdose, claiming that this was necessary to prevent the implication that his wife might have taken her own life, which he believed would prevent her from going to heaven. He justified his actions by saying he wanted to protect Helene's reputation and that of family. During this time, Asa suddenly lost interest in Helge, leading to the end of their tumultuous relationship. She went on a pilgrimage to various cities and chose not to return. Meanwhile, Helge quickly found new love with a girl named Alexandra Waldau, Asa's sister. Their relationship developed rapidly, partly due to Helge's status. By this time, many people considered him to be close to God and treated him with great respect. In the spring of 2000, Alexandra moved into Helge's house, and soon after, the couple got married. However, Helge's need for intimacy grew stronger, and he was never satisfied with just one woman. In the spring of 2001, he began courting the children's nanny, Sarah, who still worked for Helge's family. She readily accepted his attention, viewing him as a respected person. At this time, the relationship between Sarah and Helge became clear. Helge actively took advantage of Sarah's kindness and often invited her to pray with him in church. During this period, He frequently relied on messages from God. Sarah was so infatuated with Helge that she accepted all his stories without question, even feeling a sense of divine inspiration in those moments. She truly believed that she was doing something good. However, the reality was that she had fallen into the trap of a manipulator who sought to exploit her while pretending to uphold spiritual values. His intentions were completely contrary to any religious principles. As their relationship developed, Helge began to make increasingly controversial statements, claiming that God fought on earth and that he was his warrior. He explained that this role was difficult, as it sometimes required removing various obstacles. Sarah naively believed everything he said because he was a pastor, and his sermons were considered messages from God. In reality, Helge was secretly planning something harmful. He began telling Sarah that God was sending him important messages, indicating that Alexandra would soon die. He manipulated Sarah into thinking that God had shown him she was the perfect mate for him. He also threatened Sarah by saying that he would die if he did not end his marriage to Alexandra. Although their marriage was falling apart, Helge, as a pastor, could not get a divorce due to strict rules. Like many women around her, Sarah was drawn to his stories. These strange messages brainwashed Sarah, causing her to commit terrible acts. Helge manipulated her, using his power in the church and exploiting her weaknesses. He learned many control tactics from Asa and applied them. At this time, many people genuinely believed that he was very close to God, so Helge had no difficulty manipulating Sarah to his advantage. During this time, Helge still lived with Alexandra, but they had separate rooms. Every night Helge would be intimate with both women, alternating between them. He claimed this was part of a ritual to fight demons, portraying himself as God's messenger battling evil spirits. His persuasive words convinced the women of his role, and the arrangement continued until 2003. Alexandra and Helge separated but continued to live together. However, they could not formally divorce because her husband wanted to keep her. During this time, Helge's manipulation of Sarah intensified. He would often approach her only for intimacy and frequently insulted her. Despite this emotional abuse, he always ended with the words, "I love you." Sarah wanted to hear these words so much that she ignored his abuse. She seemed willing to do anything to gain God's approval, not realizing that her will was being manipulated, turning her into a puppet for a dangerous person. Helge repeatedly confronts his lover, Sarah, about her intention to kill in the name of God. Sarah says she is not ready to do this. Helge then decides to manipulate her further. He creates a new account on a messaging app and begins sending her messages from an unknown number, claiming that it is God trying to contact her. In these disturbing messages, she is warned that she does not have much time left and must kill in the name of God before November 25. At first, Sarah suspects that Helge is behind these messages, but he vehemently denies it. He resorts to shaming her again, accusing her of lacking faith. Helge then sends her messages claiming that she is destined to participate in a divine plan to lead souls to heaven. The next message asserts that this is the only path to her salvation. Eventually, this manipulation instills real fear in her soul, causing Sarah to commit a crime. On the night of November 8, 2003, Alexandra awoke in bed to find Sarah attacking her with a hammer. Remarkably, Alexandra fought off the attack. The reason for the attack was a message that Sarah believed she had received from God, instructing her to kill the pastor's wife. Surprisingly, Sarah was not punished for her actions, possibly because Helge insisted that the incident be kept secret and not reported to the police. As a result, there was no official record of the attack, and the situation was covered up. Consequently, Helge banished Sarah, declaring that she must live with her father for the rest of her life. Unfortunately, this did not affect Sarah's relationship with God. She continued to receive messages convincing her of the need to kill. Soon after these events, Helga began a relationship with a neighbor named Annette Linde, who was married to Daniel Linde. Worried about his new rival, Helgi began sending Sarah messages demanding that she kill, accompanied by threats if she did not comply. Still under the influence of the messages from God, Sarah agreed to take up arms again. Helgi maintained complete control over his former lover Sarah, turning her into a puppet. Although she failed to fulfill God's plan the first time, she was given a second chance. This time, Sarah was better prepared. She bought weapons and learned how to make a silencer at home online. She diligently followed God's instructions, hoping to succeed and free her soul. On January 10, 2004, Sarah got into her father's car. Staying in touch with Helga, she approached his house at 3:30 a.m. It is important to note that Alexandra was still living in Helga's house during this time. Sarah parked her car 500 meters away. To avoid detection, she wore a black mask and shoes of different sizes to distract the police. The front door was unlocked. Helgi had broken the lock first to make it look like a robbery. Alexandra was sleeping in bed, completely unaware of the danger she was in. Sarah entered Alexandra's room and attacked her. When Alexandra woke up screaming, Sarah opened fire, killing her on the spot. Then at 4:30 a.m., Sarah went to kill her next target, Daniel, the husband of Helga's new lover. He knew Daniel was home alone and informed Sarah about this. However, the door was locked. Sarah knocked on the door, and when Daniel opened it, she raised her gun and killed him without hesitation. After Daniel fell, she ran away, not knowing that he had survived and was trying to call for help. When the police arrived, Daniel was still conscious enough to describe his attacker. At that time, Helga was already on the scene, wanting to help his neighbor. He accompanied Daniel to the hospital, where he learned that his wife had been killed. Helgi then began to act like a grieving husband. Unfortunately, the description Daniel gave of his attacker was unclear because she was wearing a mask, and he could not see her face clearly. Sarah gradually became the center of attention. A neighbor, who was not influenced by faith, recalled that Helga's first wife had died under similar mysterious circumstances. Then there was the hammer attack on his second wife, Alexandra. She may have been the victim of murder, but miraculously, she fought back. At the scene of Alexandra's attack and on Daniel's door, police found Sarah's bloody fingerprints, providing clear evidence of her involvement. Sarah insisted that she acted alone and that no one had encouraged her to do so. She later claimed that she had committed the crime in the name of God. When her phone was confiscated, police discovered Helgi's number as well as an unknown number. Although there were no messages from God, they did find a call from Helgi. After a thorough search, another cell phone was found in her home, containing numerous messages describing a disturbing and manipulative relationship with God. This phone contained over 1,000 text messages in which Sarah expressed her compulsion to kill. It was soon discovered that the unknown number belonged to Helga, a local church pastor. Sarah was devastated by the news, as she truly believed that her conversations on the messaging app were of divine origin. After learning the truth, she decided to share all the details with the police. Annette, the wife of the injured Daniel, was also suspected of being involved and was arrested. However, she was released 2 weeks later without charge when the police confirmed her innocence. During the trial, Helgi appeared arrogant, denied any wrongdoing, and showed no remorse for his actions. Psychiatrists evaluated him and determined that he was sane. The extent of his manipulation was staggering. The prosecution had enough evidence to convict Helga of inciting Alexandra's murder and the attempted murder of Daniel. Helge Fossmo was sentenced to life in prison, but was eligible for parole after 24 years. He has appealed several times over the years, all of which were rejected. He was also charged in connection with the death of his first wife, but he was acquitted due to insufficient evidence. In 2007, While in prison, Helge married for a third time, but the identity of his wife remains unknown. In an interview in August 2006, he confessed to being involved in Alexandra's death and the attempted murder of Daniel. He claimed that several other people helped organize the murder, but the case has never been reopened. Helge Fossmo is currently serving his sentence in Tidaholm prison in Sweden. During the trial, a video of the crime reenactment was played, in which Sarah detailed how she committed the crime. An edited version of the video was discovered during the private investigation and played in court. Although Sarah was the one who carried out the attack, inaccuracies in the reenactment raise questions about what really happened and who was responsible. There was suspicion that Helge may have been the real killer. Sarah Svensson was declared insane and committed to a psychiatric hospital. In 2011, her treatment ended, and she was released after doctors determined she was no longer a threat to society. Asa Waldau, a church leader, was convicted in 2020 of 8 counts of assaulting a former parishioner and sentenced to community service. After her experience, she changed her last name, started a new job, and stayed away from the church. Daniel survived the attack thanks to the efforts of doctors, but he chose not to return to the city because he feared the local church. The case of Christy Sheets. Christy was born in 1974 in Decatur, Alabama, a city with a population of around 55,000. She was raised by her mother, Rebecca, a nurse who was a single parent. She attended Austin High School but did not graduate. At school, she was a member of a popular, exclusive teenage clique. It was during this time that she met Jason Sheets, who became the love of her life. Although they were both young when they met, they felt that they would be together forever. Jason Sheets was born in Lawrence County, Alabama, and graduated from East Lawrence High School in Trinity, just 15 minutes from Christy's home. He was an exceptional baseball player, very intelligent, and well-liked. Over time, Jason and Christy became the perfect couple. They married in the mid-90s and later moved to Fort Worth, a city in north-central Texas. There they welcomed 2 beautiful daughters, Taylor, born in 1994, and Madison, born in 1999. When their eldest daughter, Taylor, was in 2nd grade, the family moved to Fulshear, a quiet suburb in Texas in the southern United States. They were a middle-class family, thanks in large part to Jason's income as a technology consultant at an oil and gas company in Houston. He graduated in 1993 with a degree in mathematics and began his career as a software developer at various companies. Christy, on the other hand, did not have a stable job. She worked as an executive assistant and vice president at a transportation company, and also as a stylist in a beauty salon. In 2015, she took a job as a receptionist at a laser hair removal clinic in Houston. John Hollis, the clinic manager and Christy's boss, sometimes viewed her as a problem employee, with an unstable personality. Christy has an easy-to-listen Southern accent, which often brings a sense of comfort to customers. However, when there were no customers, she would become different and somewhat sad. Eventually, her boss decided to fire her, which caused her to go through a difficult and painful period. As for Christy and Jason's daughters, they are Madison and Taylor. The eldest, Taylor, is a kind and thoughtful young girl. She has many friends and is trusted by those around her. One friend called her a beautiful soul, highlighting her sweetness and kindness. Taylor often babysat for neighbors and even tutored their children in various subjects. For 6 months, she worked at a preschool, where everyone recognized her natural talent for connecting with kids. During this time, she also taught the boys sign language, which she had learned independently. Besides, Taylor is also a talented and creative artist with a great passion for art. She started dating Juan Sebastian in 2011, and the two got engaged in 2013. Meanwhile, Madison, Taylor's younger sister, is a cheerful and positive girl who always brings joy to everyone around her. Since the age of 14, Madison has been a nanny in her spare time. Taylor and Madison had a wonderful time together. They never fought and truly loved each other. Their father, Jason, also cherished his daughters, and they spent a lot of time together. Christy, their mother, adored her daughters. Madison and Taylor, who were everything to her, they were her reason for living. Christy spoke proudly about her girls, frequently sharing their photos on social media as a testament to her love. 2 years earlier, on Mother's Day in 2013, Taylor shared a heartfelt tribute to her mom, Christy, on Facebook. She praised her mother for being incredibly generous, always prioritizing her family without expecting anything in return. Additionally, she described her mother as one of the strongest people she knows, having faced many challenges in life, but always showing love and devotion to her daughter. However, beneath that happy exterior, Christy is struggling with emotional problems. In 2012, Christy lost her grandfather, who had been her main support and mentor, marking the beginning of her emotional decline. Just 2 months later, Christy's mother passed away, leading her to battle severe depression. This condition became so overwhelming that she attempted to end her life 3 times by taking large doses of medication and began drinking excessively. Over time, Christy required ongoing treatment for depression and anxiety, spending the next 4 years in 3 different private psychiatric hospitals. Her life became chaotic, and she even lived separately in a rented apartment away from her family. For Christy, her husband Jason is not only her greatest love, but also her rock during difficult times. Unfortunately, their relationship began to deteriorate. Since 2012, they faced marital issues due to Christy's emotional struggles, leading to multiple breakups. In 2016, Jason decided to move out, believing that divorce was the only solution. By this point, it was clear that the situation in their family was not good. Between 2012 and 2016, police visited their home at least 14 times, due to family disputes and requests for assistance. Following these incidents, a specialized police team was assigned to monitor the family. Additionally, the Sheriff's Department's crisis management team intervened. In one 911 call in November 2015, someone requested police assistance to check on their home, as they had heard that the occupants might be intoxicated. However, it turned out that the issue was a verbal argument between Jason and Christy, with no physical violence involved. An important part of Christy's personality was her strong support for the right to bear arms. Although she applied for a weapon license, the state denied her request due to her mental health history. Nevertheless, she inherited a weapon from her maternal grandfather. The presence of weapons in the house made Taylor feel uneasy. She confided in a childhood friend that it caused her anxiety, especially given her mother, Christy's mental health issues. On Friday, June 24, 2016, Jason celebrated his 45th birthday. He spent most of the day with one of his daughters and communicated with Christy about the next step in their relationship. He was considering officially ending the relationship. When he got home, he found Christy sitting in the backyard and informed her that he had decided to file for divorce. Christy had difficulty accepting that her life would never be the same again, and no one could predict what would happen next. Jason went to the other side of the house, and then Christy called a family meeting. He thought this meeting would be to announce their divorce. Around 5 p.m., Jason and Christy started arguing again as everyone gathered in the main room. Jason could no longer hold back and finally expressed what had been on his mind. He wanted a divorce. He told Christy that this would be the last birthday he would let her ruin. The tension escalated. The argument intensified because Christy was angry with Taylor for supporting their divorce. Christy decided to punish Taylor by forbidding her from seeing her boyfriend, even though they were supposed to get married the following Monday. Jason disagreed with Christy, finding it unreasonable to punish Taylor. As soon as the situation escalated, Christy suddenly grabbed her maternal grandfather's weapon from under the couch cushion and pointed it at Jason. She accused Jason of forcing her to do the act and insisted he should suffer the consequences. Jason was extremely scared and begged her not to take action. Amidst her chaotic emotions, Madison managed to call 911 for assistance. Meanwhile, Jason desperately begs Christy not to pull the trigger, urging her to think of their daughter. He assured her they would do anything she wanted, but Christy, clearly agitated, replied that it was too late. During the call to emergency services, screams could be heard from Jason and their daughters. One daughter cried out, "Please don't do this. Forgive them. Don't do it." But her pleas were ignored by her mother, Christy. As Jason tried to calm Christy, she began attacking Madison and Taylor. By that time, the police were already en route. Jason ran behind the couch, trying to help his daughters escape, but it was too late. Christy attacked Madison in the neck. As Madison attempted to flee out the front door, she lost consciousness and died from her injuries. Christy then pursued Taylor, who was also injured and trying to escape. In that moment, Taylor reached out to 911, struggling to explain the situation and mention her injury, but the dispatcher could only hear sounds of distress before the call abruptly ended. The neighbors were in shock at what was unfolding. One of them attempted to call 911 and explain the situation. The neighbor reported that 2 individuals had wounds from weapons and that a woman with a weapon was coming out of her house. Later, the neighbor stated that the people involved in the shooting lived next door and that he was trying to safeguard himself and his family because the armed woman was still outside. Christy then attacked Taylor again, who was lying in the middle of the street as neighbors watched in shock from their homes. At the same time, Jason ran to the end of the street, calling for help. Throughout the incident, Christy appeared calm and emotionless. In total, she inflicted 3 wounds on Taylor's head and back. At this point, the police arrived on the scene. They ordered Christy to surrender her weapon, but she refused. In response, one of the officers attacked her, ending her life. A helicopter transported the critically injured Taylor to Texas Medical Center, where she later died from her injuries. Jason was not attacked during the incident, but he was taken to a medical facility because he was in shock and unable to process what had happened. A few days later, Taylor and Madison were laid to rest at the Memorial Cemetery in Decaturina, Alabama. This tragic case has garnered significant attention in the United States, particularly after authorities released the emergency calls made by Taylor and Madison during the attack. Friends and family were shocked, as they viewed Christy and her children as a happy family without any apparent issues. Many questioned what could have driven Christy to commit such a horrific act, and why she would deliberately kill her own daughters. Jason was devastated by the loss of his daughters at the hands of his wife. A few days after the tragedy, he told the police that Christy seemed intent on making him suffer. Despite having the opportunity, she did not harm him. Jason believed she wanted him to live with the pain of her actions, which led him to conclude that her motive for killing their daughters was to inflict suffering on him. This suggested that Christy was determined to kill their daughters that day. Evidence supporting this theory includes her hiding the weapon between the sofa cushions, indicating she planned to gather the family and then use the weapon. A friend mentioned that she always sensed something would happen, but she never expected Christy to take such action, describing Christy as toxic to the family. Because people loved Madison and Taylor, their tragic fate caused pain for many. This case continues to shock people because despite Christy's emotional struggles, she had no history of violence or aggressive behavior. Almost a week after the attack, Jason shared a series of photos of his daughters, Madison and Taylor, on Facebook. In September 2016, Jason gave a television interview where he stated that the power of God helped him cope with the loss of his daughters. He expressed that he had nothing positive to say about Christy, as his love for her had faded long ago. Although he felt immense sadness, he spoke calmly about how he could never escape the memories of that day. The story of Christy's family is still heartbreaking to hear. It serves as another reminder of the underlying mental health issues But no one could have predicted the outcome. Christie turned her deep love into hate, leading her to kill her own daughters. Her actions were meant to ensure that her husband would suffer a lifetime of painful memories. Truly horrifying. The case of Maria Trinidad Matus. Maria Trinidad Matus Tenorio was born on January 31, 1993, in Chucan, Puebla, Mexico, into a prominent family of lawyers. From an early age, Maria showed a keen interest in music, often singing and dancing at family gatherings. Her mother strongly believed that her daughter would become a talented artist. Maria often helps people in need and has a deep love for nature, especially the sea. She has tattoos on one arm representing the ocean, a snail, a crown, and a flower, while her other arm features symbols illustrating her free spirit. Maria is often photographed with a radiant appearance, and she loves to pose for the camera. She composes and performs songs, nurturing her passion for music. After completing high school, Maria enrolled in college to study classical music composition, vocals, and jazz. She began her artistic journey with a friend, and together they formed a jazz duo and started performing at local bars. While Maria's dreams were beginning to come true, her career faced significant challenges. At the age of 18, during a concert, a member of the band pulled her backstage and attempted to molest her. Fortunately, Maria escaped. She did not reveal the incident until July 2018, when she decided to share her experience on her social media accounts. Her post sparked a strong reaction from her followers and friends, and the attacker later apologized. That same year, she launched her music project. Her debut single quickly climbed the charts. Maria shared that the song brought back memories of sunsets in Tulum with a special man. She describes her project as inspired by her love of mermaids and the ocean. Incorporating elements of electronic pop and hip-hop, she fully immersed herself in this creative world, taking on the roles of DJ and dancer. As her career progressed, many recognized her as a talented artist. In mid-August 2018, she scheduled several performances in Mexico City, including at the Rockmore nightclub in Polanco and events at the Vasconcelos Library. However, before her tour began, she decided to take a vacation to fulfill her longtime dream of traveling and experiencing different cultures. Maria chose Costa Rica, a country known for its peace and natural beauty. On July 26, 2018, Maria shared a photo at the airport, saying goodbye to her loved ones before her first solo trip to Central America. Although she felt a little nervous, she was mostly excited. In her post, she expressed her joy at traveling alone and experiencing nature. After arriving at Juan Santa Maria Airport, Maria planned various activities and outings. During the first days of the trip, she met a young British woman, and they quickly became close friends. They spent time enjoying the beautiful scenery of La Fortuna San Carlos in Alajuela and the stunning beaches of Santa Teresa. Maria felt extremely happy and inspired throughout her vacation, sharing fun photos on social media, including moments of her swimming in the sea with her new friends. She shared photos and videos with her mother, showcasing her adventures and the sights she encountered. Everything seemed to be going well. The last text message Maria's mother received from her daughter was on the evening of August 4, in which Maria mentioned that she was going to a bar with her British friend. At around 3 a.m. on August 5, the girls left the bar and opted to walk along the beach in Carmen de Santa Teresa, northeastern Costa Rica. Strange men suddenly appeared in their path, apparently intending to rob them. The attackers seized the girls, but Maria's British companion managed to escape. She sought help from anyone nearby, including a security guard from their hotel. During the attack, one of the assailants threatened to kill Maria, pushing her into the water before eventually drowning her. The exact sequence of events remains unclear, but it is believed that the criminals used violence against Maria, knocked her down, and then drowned her in the sea, leaving her body behind. The attackers fled the scene, and the body was discovered by locals after being alerted by a young British woman who returned to help Maria. The community quickly organized their own investigation. Using the description provided by the British woman, they identified a man from surveillance camera footage taken at a nearby hotel, which showed a man walking down the street in wet clothes at night. The residents caught a suspect, and in their anger at his actions, they beat him, tied him up, and took him away. The police had to intervene and arrest the man. When they searched him, they found money and belongings that belonged to Maria. The suspects were later identified as Esquivel Cerdas and Mendoza Benavides. The police took Maria's body to the Costa Rican Center for Forensic Medicine to conduct the necessary tests to determine the cause of death. Although the exact results of the autopsy are still unknown, the investigation has found that the girl was abused before drowning. Maria's friend, who witnessed the incident, identified Esquivel Cerdas as one of the attackers, claiming that he had been harassing her. Both men were brought to court, where the forensic department charged them with premeditated murder and abuse of the British tourist. There were requests to detain the men, but they declared themselves not guilty. In the end, the court decided to impose a 3-month preventive detention order on Esquivel Cerdas, while Mendoza Benavides was released due to insufficient evidence connecting him to the crime. The Attorney General announced that although the man had been released, she planned to continue the investigation and would file a new appeal for his detention at a new hearing. News of Maria's death reached her relatives a few hours after the hotel manager contacted her sister via social media. She then called their mother to share the heartbreaking news. Maria's family quickly traveled to Costa Rica, where they were assisted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in completing the necessary paperwork to repatriate her body. As news of Maria's tragic death spread on social media, many users commented and criticized her for traveling alone. However, others came to her defense. Friends, family members, and many outraged strangers rallied to support Maria, defending her against the unfounded accusations. Meanwhile, Santa Teresa residents, dressed in white, held a vigil in her honor and called for justice. People of all ages, including businessmen and tourists, came together for the White March, demanding an end to violence against women and improved security in the country. An altar was erected on the beach where her body was found. Flowers were placed in the sea, and Maria's songs were played. In an interview with a local radio station, Maria's mother broke down in tears and thanked the community for their outpouring of support in memory of her daughter. She shared that her family was deeply saddened. Tragically, Maria's vibrant life was cut short by the sea, which she loved so much. On August 9, her parents returned her body to Mexico. That same day, police arrested a third suspect, a 40-year-old craftsman named Sancho Rodriguez, as he was boarding a bus. Officers found scratches on his hands, and his brother's daughter identified him as one of the attackers. The Attorney General announced that Sancho must undergo a medical examination at the forensic department due to his injuries. Official records show that he was previously homeless until a neighbor provided him with housing, allowing him to rebuild his life. Several years earlier, he had faced charges from the Attorney General's office for crimes including burglary, armed robbery, and attempted murder. In September 2007, he was sentenced to nearly 13 years in prison and was released on March 26, 2017, after serving his sentence. A thorough investigation was conducted to identify the suspects and gather evidence of their involvement. It was later revealed that less than 24 hours before the tragedy involving Maria, another victim, a 30-year-old Spanish tourist named Arantxa Gutierrez Lopez, had been murdered in Tortuguero. Both crimes shocked Costa Rica, prompting many feminist groups to rally and demand government action to address these issues. Some protesters voiced their concerns about the country's inadequate security. A suitcase was brought to the square, bearing the names of Maria and Arantxa, the two victims of the violent attacks. Protesters lit candles, opened the suitcase, and wrote condolences on paper. In response, President Carlos Alvarado Quesada announced that he would allocate $1 million from the national budget each year to the Costa Rican Institute for Tourist Safety. He expressed his deep sorrow for the tragic events involving the girls, as well as the attacks on 2 Spanish tourists and 3 Costa Ricans in Rincón de la Vieja National Park. The tourism minister also addressed the situation, confirming the death of the foreign tourist and noting that an emergency meeting has been scheduled with the National Committee for Tourist Safety, which includes several organizations and business leaders. The tourism minister clarified that her department will increase support from the Ministry of Public Security to respond to crime in certain areas. They will focus on using technology to improve information sharing and will ensure that hotels have adequate safety materials. In addition, travel safety tips will be provided to tourists upon their arrival in the country. She stressed that despite the recent tragic events, tourism continues to grow in Costa Rica, which attracts about 3 million visitors a year, according to official statistics. On June 6, 2019, the prosecutor's office completed the investigation into Esquivel Cerdas and Sancho Rodriguez, who were charged in connection with Maria's death. On August 3, 2020, the trial took place. The prosecutor presented the case, noting that they only had witness testimony because the surveillance video did not record the event. More than 10 witnesses were scheduled to be questioned, but they refused to testify without providing a reason. The indictment states that Sancho attacked both girls with a sharp kitchen knife with the intention of robbing them. According to the prosecutor, he followed Maria while Esquivel Cerdas stole the British woman's belongings. Maria escaped and sought help. They believe that during this time, Sancho dragged Maria about 400 meters from the scene of the incident to avoid attracting attention. He then separated her and held her underwater until she suffocated. After committing the crime, he fled with the girl's mobile phone. The court heard a statement from Maria's mother, who was unable to attend the trial in person. In her written statement, she shared that her family life had been devastated by the tragedy and expressed her hope that the perpetrators would face severe punishment. She expressed her gratitude to all those who had helped and supported her, and she hoped that the defendants would be sentenced to at least 30 years in prison. The outcome of the case took everyone by surprise. On August 11, 2020, the Punta Arenas Criminal Court sentenced Esquivel Cerdas to 15 years in prison for abusing a British tourist who was accompanying Maria. Sancho Rodriguez was acquitted. In announcing the verdict, the judges stated that the evidence presented by the prosecution was insufficient to prove his guilt, leading to his release. The judge explained that although the time and place had been clearly established, the prosecution had not yet proven how the events occurred. Therefore, it could not be determined with certainty that Sancho was responsible for Maria's death. This decision angered not only Maria's family, but also many people in Costa Rica. In response, several feminist organizations organized a protest, collected signatures, and urged the prosecutor's office to appeal the ruling. Maria's mother expressed in an interview that the judge's decision meant that her daughter's death would go unpunished and allowed a cowardly criminal to escape responsibility. She was confused as to why the judge declared him innocent when she believed there was enough evidence against him. After the prosecutor's office announced that the trial would not be reopened, Maria's family was contacted. They informed her family that they had 15 days to file a private appeal against the appeals court's decision. However, Maria's mother chose not to pursue the case further. She felt that she had suffered too much and did not want to relive that traumatic experience. That night, the case sparked significant reactions both within Costa Rica and beyond. The outrage stemmed not only from the murder of a foreigner, but also from the perceived failure of the justice system. The tragic death of Maria, who passed away with her dreams unfulfilled, will always be remembered by her family and friends. The incident also highlighted the shortcomings of law enforcement agencies in protecting citizens and administering justice, The crime has prompted renewed discussions about the dangers women face when traveling alone. Social media has become a platform where some blame the victims rather than the criminals, while others speak out against the violence and call for better security measures. It is disheartening to note that Maria's family has not seen justice served. Her abusers and killers have never been imprisoned. Only one suspect is currently in prison, and it is not for Maria's murder. The case of Sarah Cafferkey. Sarah Cafferkey was born on June 20, 1990 in Queensland, Australia. When she was young, her family encountered many financial difficulties, which caused tension between her parents. Eventually, her father found a better-paying job, and the family relocated to Bacchus Marsh, a suburb of Melbourne. However, moving house made the problems in her family increasingly serious. As a result, Sarah's parents are unable to mend their relationship, their disagreements leading them to realize that they cannot continue to be together. They decided to separate, and Sarah stayed with her mother. Despite their disagreements, both parents maintained a peaceful relationship to avoid affecting Sarah's life. The divorce proceedings concerning custody and property were handled amicably, as they both wanted to prioritize their daughter's well-being. At the time, Sarah and her mother lived in Bacchus Marsh, a town known for its green hills, farmhouses, and agricultural lands, where crime was rare. Even though she was an only child, Sarah never felt lonely, because they lived in a close-knit neighborhood. In her early years, it was easy for her to make friends thanks to her outgoing personality. When she wasn't with her mother, she spent time with her father in Queensland. However, as she grew older, she wanted to stay with her mother more to be closer to her friends. Due to her father's busy work schedule and his frequent visits to Bacchus Marsh to visit her, she had difficulty making friends in Queensland. Eventually, when Sarah was able to stay in Bacchus Marsh, she began visiting Queensland less often, much to her father's disappointment. Despite this, they maintained regular communication through phone calls, and her father occasionally came to visit. Both parents loved her and supported her throughout her life. When Sarah started elementary school, her mother chose the closest school, which was just a 10-minute walk from their home. There, she quickly made many friends. The route to school passed through a local swamp, a large flooded area with paths. This was the only short way for her to walk there. Along the way, she noticed an old house off to the side, unaware of how significant it would become in her life. Since first grade, Sarah has been very studious. She excelled in her studies and spent a lot of time on her homework after school. At the same time, she started participating in athletics and took part in competitions with other kids. She also started practicing karate and singing in the choir. She often expressed to her family that she wanted a brother or sister, but her mother wasn't ready for another child and declined. As a result, Sarah remained an only child. After finishing 10th grade, Sarah faced health challenges. She was diagnosed with asthma and was hospitalized, where doctors discovered that she had bronchial spasms that could escalate into serious attacks. This condition was dangerous because it could onset suddenly and lead to loss of consciousness. As a result, she had to limit her physical activities, withdraw from competitions, stop singing, and make frequent hospital visits. The main issue was the need to quickly recognize and manage potentially life-threatening attacks. This situation disrupted her plans, so much that she had to complete her final year of school through homeschooling. Due to ongoing hospital visits, she missed a substantial amount of the curriculum and struggled to catch up on missed topics. Thankfully, Sarah was diligent and determined not to give up. However, homeschooling posed significant challenges for her, leading to a loss of contact with many friends and limiting her social interactions. Despite this, she maintained regular communication and met with a few close friends. After finishing school, she had some free time and decided to get a job at a local bar. In 2011, she turned 21 and met a guy named Christopher Stewart. He seemed nice and caring, making Sarah feel happy. She believed he was the one she could spend her life with, and often shared this with her family and friends. However, her family was concerned about him from the start. They felt he was not as good as he appeared, but Sarah, infatuated with young love, ignored their warnings. Unfortunately, their concerns soon proved valid. After 2 months of dating, Christopher began to reveal a different side of himself. He had a bad reputation in the city, with rumors of using prohibited substances and possibly being involved in criminal activities. He started to manipulate Sarah, isolating her from her friends. Sadly, Sarah didn't realize it. He then began to create rifts between her and her family. Sarah once shared with her friend Ashley how she started using soft prohibited substances. Despite being persuaded not to, she found the experience captivating. Over time, she began to support her boyfriend more, which led her to drink more frequently and experiment with more powerful banned substances. By this time, he had completely replaced her friends with his group of friends, who were all living unhealthy lifestyles and were mostly substance addicts. Their home became a gathering place for various troubled individuals who would use prohibited substances for days on end. Sarah was in a difficult situation. Her friends realized that she is losing herself and try to help. However, she refused to leave Christopher. Despite this, she was starting to feel the negative effects of her substance use. She lost her job and realized she wanted to escape this harmful cycle. At one point, she attempted to detox at home, but it was unsuccessful. Eventually, she decided to check into a medical center for an addiction treatment program. After spending a week there, Sarah successfully completed the detox process and returned home. She underwent a remarkable transformation. The treatment had a positive impact on her. She even resumed her previous interests and aspirations. Now she was determined to finish her education, pursue a career as a lawyer, find a job, and travel. To successfully quit her addiction, Sarah needed to end her relationship with her addicted boyfriend, Christopher, who was a negative influence on her life. This wasn't the first time they had broken up, and he seemed indifferent to her decision, likely believing that they would get back together eventually. However, Sarah was committed to improving her life and was determined not to revert to her old ways. Eventually, Christopher understood that he couldn't win her back, which made him angry, and he began to stalk her. One day, while working at the bar, Christopher sent a 47-year-old man named Stephen James Hunter to meet Sarah. This was unusual because Stephen was not related to either of them. He had a bad reputation in the city as a cruel person linked to the criminal world, but these were just rumors, and no one had concrete evidence against him. Even though he scared her, she decided not to back down. During their conversation, Sarah got to know Stephen better. Gradually, they even started hanging out together. She described him as almost like a father figure to her, though it's unclear why such a close bond formed between them, despite their differences. At that time, Sarah's biological father lived in Queensland, and they kept in touch, which made Stephen's role in her life somewhat ambiguous. On November 7, 2012, Sarah, her friends, and Stephen were drinking together in the dormitory of a local educational institution where one of her friends was enrolled. The following day, Sarah and Stephen frequently exchanged text messages. On Friday, November 9, Sarah returned to her mother's house. She usually spent weekends with her family, but this time she had her own plans and went to visit a friend, promising to return by the end of the weekend. Sarah first stopped at a store, where she was captured on security cameras. Afterwards, she went to meet her mother on Saturday, but did not return home. By Sunday, there was still no news, and by Monday, she had not come back. Her mother became worried and reached out to several of Sarah's friends, who also had no idea where she was. The situation grew more concerning when it became clear that Sarah's car was missing along with her, indicating she had not returned home. There had been no problems in her family relationships, making it unlikely that she had run away, especially since she hadn't taken any belongings with her. The prolonged silence became increasingly suspicious. By Tuesday, November 13, there was still no word from her, so her mother contacted multiple news channels to report Sarah as a missing person. On that Tuesday, Sarah was supposed to attend her rehabilitation program, but she never showed up at the medical center. Sarah's parents began to worry about her disappearance and suspected that her ex-boyfriend, Christopher, might be involved. They questioned whether he could have kidnapped her or manipulated her in some way. Concerned for their daughter's safety, her mother contacted the police. The police quickly began their search. The first 48 hours were crucial, but they were missed, raising the possibility that Sarah might not be alive. Initially, the main suspect was her ex-boyfriend, Christopher Stewart, but he was soon cleared after investigators confirmed his alibi. The police then turned their attention to Stephen, a 47-year-old man who had a negative reputation in the community. Residents described him as having issues with self-control, anger, and legal troubles. A review of his criminal record has raised further concerns. He is known to be addicted to prohibited substances and is suspected of trafficking in prohibited substances. Several of Sarah's friends identified a man named Stephen as the last person who might have seen her alive. They believed that Sarah was visiting him. The police reached out to Stephen, who confirmed that he had seen Sarah on Saturday, November 10, when she arrived at his house near the swamp. They said goodbye that evening, as Sarah stayed behind while Stephen had to leave for a business matter, intending to return in a few hours. He stated that Sarah was supposed to wait at his house, which was near the swamp that she used to walk by on her way to school as a child. This area was a large marshy region surrounding her mother's house, and Stephen owned a small house there. On Sunday, when he returned, he found she was gone, and like everyone else, he was unable to contact her. Investigators arrived at the swamp and conducted a thorough inspection of the surrounding area, but found nothing suspicious. On November 15, the investigation progressed when police received a tip about Sarah's car. The vehicle was located parked in a small town called Morey Barren, about a half-hour drive from Bacchus Marsh. There was no connection between Morey Barren and Stephen, yet he remained a suspect. On November 17, police were granted a search warrant for Stephen's home, which was located near a swamp. When they opened the door, they were met with a pungent smell of decomposition. Inside the house, everything was in disarray, as if a struggle had occurred. Bloodstains were found in the garbage bins, various rooms, and on the stairs. Although they did not find a body, forensic scientists recovered several items from the dumpster, including a container of acid. The most notable item discovered by the police was a large green garbage can filled with concrete that had hardened quickly. Investigators immediately suspected that a body was inside. The trash was then sent to a lab for analysis, and the results confirmed their suspicions: a human body encased in concrete at the bottom of the bin. The body was compressed and deformed, indicating that it had been subjected to extreme pressure. It seemed that Stephen did not have time to dispose of the body and did not take into account that hiding the body in such a way would not mask the smell of death, which had filled the entire house. On November 20, 2012, Stephen was arrested for the murder of Sarah. During the initial interrogation, Stephen denied any involvement in the murder and also denied trying to hide the body. However, after being questioned harshly by detectives, he eventually broke down and provided his account of events, admitting to killing her. He explained that at around 7 p.m. on Saturday, November 10th, Sarah came to his house where they drank alcohol and used prohibited substances together. They then got into an argument, and in a fit of anger, she pushed Stephen and hit him in the chest. As a result, He lost control and attacked her, hitting her repeatedly in the head until she lost consciousness and fell to the floor. Stephen attacked Sarah with a hammer, causing fatal wounds to her skull and damaging her lungs and liver. Tragically, Sarah died from these injuries. Feeling lost and confused about what to do with Sarah's body, Stephen then turned to a friend. Because he was under supervision, he was determined to conceal his crime. Not wanting to face prison again, Stephen locked his house and returned with his friend. When he explained what had happened, his friend quickly distanced himself, insisting he wanted no part in the murder. Meanwhile, Sarah's body remained in a pool of blood on the kitchen floor. 2 days later, he wrapped Sarah's body in a bag, placed it in his car, and went to visit a friend named Timmy, where he confessed to the murder. At the party, Stephen asked his friend Timmy for help disposing of a body, specifically wanting to bury it. Timmy refused, expressing concern about getting into legal trouble, and suggested that Stephen turn himself in. Despite this, Timmy did not avoid the conversation. They even went to a coffee shop to grab a bite to eat, with the body still in Timmy's car. On their way back, Stephen bought a canister of hydrochloric acid, 3 bags of quick-drying cement, and a roll of black polyethylene film. After their meeting, they parted ways, and Stephen proceeded to carry out his plan, which involved encasing Sarah's body in concrete at his house in the swamp. He placed the body in the bottom of a plastic trash can and filled it with concrete. On November 14, Stephen returned to take Sarah's car and then drove to a nearby town, Maury Barron. He left the car there in hopes of confusing the investigation. During the investigation, it became clear that his negative reputation in the city was much worse than previously thought. Stephen had a long criminal history, and his life had been troubled from the start. He grew up in harsh conditions, under the abuse of his father, who bullied him and used a weapon to instill fear. His father once tied up his mother, threatening to shoot her, but he managed to call his grandparents for help. They were able to persuade his father to put the weapon down and free his mother. These traumatic experiences had a profound impact on Stephen, but they did not excuse his later actions. Even as a child, Stephen was already known to the police in his city. In 1983, when he was just 17 years old, he committed his first armed robbery. The police apprehended him and charged him, but due to his age, he avoided serious consequences. This was his first major crime. By 1986, at the age of 20, he was again in trouble with the law. He worked at a supermarket in a Melbourne suburb with an 18-year-old girl named Jacqueline, whom he had feelings for. However, she was not interested in him. Tragically, Stephen attacked Jacqueline, resulting in her death simply because she rejected his advances. He then disposed of her body, but never confessed to the crime in court. Despite his denial, the jury found him guilty, and he was sentenced to 16 years in prison. He served 13 years and was released in December. He was then 35, had spent most of his adult life in prison, and is now back in Australia. Jacqueline's family opposed the situation, convinced that Stephen was beyond rehabilitation and would continue committing crimes. Unfortunately, they could not prevent his release or impose any restrictions on him. In 2005, their worst fears came to fruition when Stephen returned to court for theft, assault, and trafficking in prohibited substances. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison but was eligible for parole after 4 years. After his release, Stephen moved to Bacchus Marsh, likely because few people there knew him. Some distant acquaintances helped him find a job in road service. However, he quickly resumed distributing illegal substances, with assistance from Sarah's ex-boyfriend, Christopher. While residents recognized him as a dangerous individual, they had no idea how dangerous he truly was. After serving another prison sentence, he was released on probation, which was scheduled to end on October 30, 2012. Just over a week after his release, Stephen murdered Sarah, making the public extremely angry. People began to feel unsafe, questioning a justice system that allowed dangerous criminals to roam free without serving their full sentences. On August 21, 2013, Stephen James Hunter was sentenced to life in prison. Normally, under Australian law, murderers can apply for parole, but Stephen was denied because of his prior criminal history involving murder. The case of Emma Faulds. Emma Faulds dedicated her life to serving society. She worked with troubled youth at a local education center and was known for her compassionate heart. On her 30th birthday, she adopted a weak puppy from a rescue, naming him Maverick. With her help, the dog grew stronger and became her loyal companion until her death. Emma was one of 2 daughters. Her younger sister, Miriam, was 7 years her junior. While Emma was recognized for her compassion and love of animals, her family's long-established shop also contributed to her reputation. The shop, which had been in her family since the late 19th century, had been maintained for several generations. Emma's father was the great-grandson of the original founder, who cherished the family traditions and hoped to pass the shop down to future generations. Emma was always cheerful and often shared humorous stories about herself that showcased her vibrant personality. Her taste for bright clothing and love of jewelry, accessories set her apart from her friends. In the many photographs of her that remain, she is almost always smiling. Besides, Emma is a friendly and optimistic person who enjoys holidays. She had a lively group of friends whom she had kept close since school. Unfortunately, she had to move away to pursue her studies, which made seeing her friends infrequent. During this time, Emma focused on her education to build a future career. Her younger sister Miriam admires her positive attitude and sees her as a role model. Inspired by Emma, Miriam also pursued an education and eventually became a nurse at a local medical center. After gaining experience, Miriam moved to Abu Dhabi, UAE, to continue her career in the healthcare field. Meanwhile, Emma dedicated herself entirely to her career, finding great joy in her work. However, this dedication came with challenges. Despite her friendly disposition, she struggled to form lasting relationships with men. She had a few boyfriends, but the relationships often ended for various reasons. This may have been because Emma prioritized establishing her career and becoming self-sufficient before considering starting a family. On Sunday, April 28, 2019, Emma decided to visit her friend, Ross Willix, who lived in Feed Park. Emma had maintained a close friendship with him for about 20 years, which was well known among their friends. They shared similar goals and views on life. They first met in the early 20s while working at a correctional facility, with Ross serving as a prison guard and instructor for staff handling unruly prisoners, and Emma working with troubled teenagers. They quickly connected, and although Ross moved away for a while, their friendship was rekindled when he returned. They often gathered with friends to enjoy each other's company. Meeting friends was a normal activity, so it didn't raise any concerns. However, Emma suddenly stopped reaching out, which was unusual for her. She typically stayed glued to her phone, but initially no one worried because they thought she might just be having a good time and had forgotten to check in. On Tuesday, April 30, 2019, Emma was scheduled to work, but she didn't show up, which was highly unusual for her. She also did not inform her colleagues of her absence. Attempts to contact her were unsuccessful. Concerned about her, her colleagues decided to reach out to her parents, who were equally bewildered and had no idea what might have happened to their daughter. Realizing that something was wrong, her relatives contacted the police for assistance. When the police officers arrived at Emma's home, they were unable to make contact with her. They heard a dog barking inside and grew increasingly worried that something might have happened. Eventually, the officers had to break down the door. Inside, they found Emma's dog, Maverick. This discovery fueled the family's concerns. As they believed Emma would never leave her dog alone, without arranging for someone to care for him, especially since he had recently undergone surgery and required constant attention. Emma was known for her caring nature, so it was clear to everyone that something must have happened to her. When Miriam learned about the situation, she realized something was wrong and quickly booked a flight back to Scotland. Upon arriving at her parents' house, she joined her family in the search for her older sister, Emma. Meanwhile, the police began gathering information from neighbors and relatives to piece together the timeline of events. A search and rescue operation, called Sultan, was initiated, involving all available police units and emergency services. They also reached out to friends, family, and bystanders for assistance, encouraging everyone to share any information on television. Emma's family arrived in the city and quickly started distributing leaflets featuring a photo of her. They leveraged social media to share her pictures and details, seeking information from local residents. They reviewed CCTV footage from the morning of April 28, when Emma was out walking her dog before her business appointment. The footage captured her talking to several neighbors, who were later interviewed as witnesses to help piece together a timeline. Emma went shopping at 5:39 p.m. that day. A dash cam from a passing car recorded Emma driving her distinctive blue BMW, recognizable by its unique license plate. The car was parked near the home of Ross, a friend she intended to visit, making him the last person known to have seen her before she went missing. On that day, Miriam spoke with Emma. Miriam mentioned that Emma had been planning to reconcile with Ross after a recent conflict. Emma intended to have a drink with him, have a conversation, and possibly spend the night if things went well. Later, around 8 p.m., one of Emma's colleagues messaged her on WhatsApp. Emma confirmed that she was at Ross's house and told her colleagues that she would be staying the night. The relationship between Emma and Ross is unclear, but her close friends and family have maintained that they are just friends. Interestingly, they had problems recently, argued several times, but then made up. Some believed that they had known each other for a long time and that their friendship could be rekindled. There was speculation that they had feelings for each other since Emma planned to stay overnight, leading to conflicting opinions. The last confirmed sighting of Emma was at 9:10 p.m. on Sunday, April 28, 2019. Her car was found parked in front of her house, but on the opposite side of the street, which raised concerns. Those who knew Emma were aware that she had a bit of obsessive-compulsive disorder, which led to some strange behavior. However, a friend of Emma's said she would never leave her car like that, and she suspected that the BMW might have been left by someone else. The police reviewed surveillance footage from city cameras and reached out to the public, hoping that someone might have seen the driver of the car that evening. They conducted searches in various apartments, looking for witnesses and checking any available video recordings. They confirmed that Emma's last known movements were on Sunday, April 28, after which she was not seen again. The last person she was with was Ross, a fact supported by CCTV footage and multiple witnesses from her circle of friends. The relationship between Ross and Emma seemed quite strange because Ross had a much darker past. He did not often talk about his identity and tried to keep his personal information private, which made him somewhat of a mystery. However, some facts about Ross were known, such as his job as a prison guard, which ended abruptly after just 4 years for 2 reasons, one official and one unofficial. According to unofficial sources, Ross was fired for organizing the smuggling of banned substances to prisoners for profit. An anonymous informant claimed he had ties to a criminal group in Glasgow that supplied him with these banned substances. In 2004, Ross's car was impounded during a search for illegal substances. No evidence was found, so law enforcement could not directly link Ross to banned substance trafficking. It seemed that Ross had been warned in advance, allowing him to cover his tracks effectively. However, there were clear violations, and authorities were determined to hold him accountable. Law enforcement officials sought a way to punish Ross to ensure he could be fired from his position and barred from returning. Consequently, he was arrested and interrogated for over 6 hours. After speaking with detectives, Ross admitted to possessing banned substances. Although a trial took place, it appears he did not face any formal penalties. Instead, he was suspended, essentially ending his career as a prison guard. He felt the need to start over and pursue his education. Ross enrolled at the University of Glasgow to study engineering, where he excelled and demonstrated great potential. After graduating, he received multiple job offers and quickly began working in his field. Over the next few years, he held positions in various companies and factories around the globe, traveling to places like Great Britain, France, Belgium, and even the Middle East. In 2010, while living and working in Israel, he met the woman who would become his wife. At that time, he was 31 and she was 45. Despite their age difference, their relationship seemed strong. However, both wanted different things. He aimed to advance his career, while she desired to start a family. This created difficulties in their relationship. He then moved to Mentone, where he took a job as a safety inspector at the station. However, at Mentone, Ross faced significant challenges that could jeopardize his career once again. From 2016 to 2018, he worked at a wind power station near Galloway Forest in Dumfries and Galloway. On March 15, 2017, a Portuguese colleague named Antonia was performing maintenance on one of the wind turbines when he fell and died. The cause of the incident was either a failure to follow safety protocols or a malfunction of the equipment. The investigation into the incident was lengthy and revealed that Ross was simply on duty when the accident occurred. However, while the incident was still not fully investigated, another incident occurred involving Ross, the disappearance of Emma. When Emma disappeared, investigators quickly focused on Ross due to his past questionable actions. A concerning detail was that he did not participate in any search for her, despite having a close, almost sibling-like relationship with her. During his initial police interview, Ross appeared reluctant and often gave vague or hesitant answers, as if searching for the right answer. He admitted to seeing Emma that evening. They had a few drinks and smoked together before planning a party at his apartment. Finally, Emma became worried after her dog Maverick's surgery, so they prepared to go to her house. He stated that he left Emma's house in the early morning of April 29, but he had no idea what happened during the time that followed. As soon as Emma's home was thoroughly searched, there was no sign of anything amiss. There were no signs of struggle, such as clutter in the house or bloodstains. This led police to suspect that Ross and Emma may not have been at her house, raising concerns that he may be lying to cover up the crime. Detectives planned to gather information from Ross, and on May 7, he was arrested, just a week after Emma was officially reported missing. The following day, he faced charges of murder and obstructing the investigation, although Emma had still not been found. Ross requested a lawyer, and his defense attorney argued that the authorities lacked sufficient evidence for the arrest, suggesting they could not hold him without just cause. By this time, enough circumstantial evidence had been gathered. In some respects, Ross's lawyer was correct. The investigation relied on circumstantial evidence, and no body had been found. As a result, the possibility of making an arrest was uncertain. It was crucial to find direct evidence of murder. The decision was made to continue searching in the most logical locations that Ross frequently visited. The first place on the list was the wind power plant where he was employed at the time. Investigators tracked his cell phone movements on the day Emma went missing and then reconstructed much of the day's timeline using video from security cameras and his phone. Late in the evening, Ross's smartphone was found on the power plant's premises. Detectives reviewed the CCTV footage from the area and discovered that the cameras recorded at least 2 visits by him in the days following Emma's disappearance. The first visit occurred on April 29 in his Mercedes SUV. The next day, he returned in his wife's Jaguar. This repetition did not appear to be coincidental. It likely indicated that he was attempting to conceal his actions. However, with few cell towers in the area, his exact location was not known. Investigators had only been able to identify a few large, hard-to-reach areas where the body was believed to be. It was suspected that Ross and Emma had an altercation that night, resulting in harm to her, and that he subsequently took her away from the city to dispose of her. It was important to find out what happened to Emma, but after a long search, the chances of finding her alive were slim. After reviewing the information, the police pinpointed several areas that were likely locations where Emma might be buried. This helped to narrow down the search area somewhat, although it remained quite large. The police reached out to local residents, who might have seen or recorded something relevant. Their investigation led them to a town called Burrell, where there were 2 roads leading to the power plant. Ross could have used these routes, but there was one problem. He came here regularly for work, so he wouldn't have aroused suspicion. Investigators gathered crucial information on the morning of April 29, the day after Emma went missing. They spotted a vehicle described as a Mercedes. In addition to appealing for help from the public, law enforcement also deployed a specialized helicopter to assist in the search. Multiple search teams worked simultaneously, thoroughly examining the suspected areas. However, they did not find any clues, which was not surprising, as much of the area investigated was heavily forested. Investigators eventually obtained surveillance footage of the car parked at Ross's home. He exited the vehicle and meticulously wiped the door handles and windows. He then spent a considerable amount of time searching inside the car, apparently trying to eliminate any evidence of his presence. In addition, his image was captured on several additional security cameras. It was discovered that he later visited a hardware store on the morning of April 30th, where he purchased 4 large bottles of bleach, chlorine, rubber gloves, various cleaning supplies, a shower curtain, and waterproof clothing. Throughout the day, Ross communicated with Emma multiple times through a messaging app and left voice messages. It was obvious he was trying to create the illusion that she was still alive to distract the investigation. However, phone records indicated that Emma had already died by that time. Investigating Ross's internet activity revealed that he conducted suspicious searches about how police track vehicles. He also looked up troubling questions related to cleaning up blood and covering up evidence after a crime. It seemed he was trying to avoid responsibility, yet he neglected to clear his browser history, apparently unaware that his online activity could be traced. Ross could not secure his release before the trial, but locating the body was essential. The only thing Ross did well was hide Emma's body, which has yet to be found. To unravel this case, experts needed to employ a microscope and spectral analysis. The police also had a pair of shoes worn by Ross on the day Emma vanished. An examination of the shoe soles revealed traces of blood and soil particles that could direct the police to the body. Advanced testing methods were utilized. Once forensic scientists provided new insights, the search area was narrowed to a specific marshy region, prompting the immediate deployment of a search party. Within 24 hours, using a specially trained dog, Emma's body was located in this designated area. Soil samples from Ross's boots matched the location of the body, with 92% accuracy. Emma was found in a remote swampy area filled with soil and moss, far from populated regions where no one would think to search for her. The location was hard to access from the air and was not easily visible. Her body was discovered naked, hidden in the bushes and covered with clumps of moss and surrounding vegetation, indicating that Ross tried to conceal her. On June 12, 2019, authorities officially announced the discovery of Emma Fauld's body, which was reported a month and a half after her disappearance. Sadly, Emma's body was in a severely decomposed state, making it impossible for forensic experts to determine the cause of death, and she could only be identified through dental records. Until the very end, her family clung to the hope that she was alive and being held by kidnappers. However, just a week after her remains were found, They publicly confirmed their search for their daughter and began posting memorial messages on dedicated social media pages. Just 3 months after Emma passed away, her beloved dog Maverick also died. Many believed Maverick didn't survive because he was heartbroken over Emma's death. This belief seemed understandable since he died earlier than expected for his breed. People were determined to find out the truth behind Emma's death, and they wanted justice. Unfortunately, the court system was slow, so the murder trial hearings did not begin until 2021. During the past 2 years, Ross consistently maintained his innocence and denied both charges against him. Unfortunately, despite his lawyer's efforts, he was found guilty on May 25. Ross Willix received a life sentence, but was eligible for parole after 20 years. Even after the verdict, Ross continued to claim he was innocent. Authorities noted that he was the only person who truly knew what happened in his home, making it impossible to recreate the incident accurately. Ross was understandably upset by the court's decision and promptly filed an appeal. His case went through several levels of the judicial system, eventually reaching the Supreme Criminal Court of Edinburgh, where the appeal was denied 6 months later. As a result, he had to accept his situation and is now serving his sentence alongside the prisoners he once supervised. At one point, he might have even supplied them with banned substances. Some are now speculating whether Ross may have pushed a coworker off the wind turbine. This seems suspicious, especially considering Ross's ability to kill. It is possible that Ross had an altercation with his coworker and pushed him off the turbine. However, this remains purely speculation, as there is no evidence to prove or disprove this theory. The case of Samantha Grigg. Youth is often a time of promise, a period when dreams, love, and aspirations are born. However, not all stories of youth are filled with light. Today, we will delve into a heartbreaking and haunting tale in which youth is not the beginning of good things, but rather the cause of an unforgettable tragedy. Just a couple of years before the events we will discuss, Samantha Grigg was living a typical teenage life. She had a remarkable vocal talent that could have launched her career. Yet, the day before her audition, her friend was found dead in the street, and she was accused of his murder. On the evening of February 15, 2014, a concerning call was made to the police in Bath, Michigan. A driver was traveling down the road when he noticed a young man lying motionless on the shoulder of the highway. Concerned for the young man's well-being, the driver stopped to help, but found that the man showed no signs of life. The driver immediately called 911 to report what he had found. The dispatcher sent emergency services to the location and guided the driver on how to provide first aid. The police and ambulance arrived at the scene around 10:30 p.m. They detected a faint pulse, and the medical staff began administering first aid, performed CPR, and rushed the young man to the hospital. Despite their efforts, the young man ultimately did not regain consciousness while in the hospital. The doctors did not find any clear reasons for the young man's death when they examined his body. A more thorough investigation was necessary. During the autopsy, the forensic pathologist discovered abrasions all over his body and head, which are common in cases where a person has fallen from a great height or been struck by a moving vehicle. Additionally, the victim had broken knuckles, and the most serious injury was a skull fracture that occurred in 2 places. He was soon identified, as he had identification documents with him. His name was Dustin Frolka, a 19-year-old from the nearby town of Owasso, Michigan. He came from a typical family with parents Sheriff Roca and Louis Hinka, who eventually separated. Dustin lived with his mother, but frequently visited his father and stepmother. In 2012, he graduated from high school and was a sophomore at Eastern Michigan University, where he was studying business management. Dustin has a daughter, but he and her mother are not married, live separately, and often have conflicts. Despite this, Dustin was thrilled about becoming a father and was committed to building a good future for his daughter. He balanced his busy career in music with his education and dedicated all his free time to her. Known by the stage name Dustin Joka, he was making strides in his music career and had recently signed a lucrative contract with a well-known music producer who believed in his talent. However, his close friends started to express concern for him as he began drinking more alcohol and smoking marijuana, which coincided with his rising career. His life seemed to be heading toward a tragic end. Dustin's legal troubles began in late January 2014 when he was arrested. As a result, he was expelled from his campus dormitory because he was considered a threat to other students, forcing him to move in with friends. Shortly before his death, he tweeted about trying a substance that acted like a hallucinogen, indicating a troubling mindset. Additionally, a large quantity of records related to illegal substances was found on his phone, raising further concerns about his well-being. The police seized and carefully examined all communications from Dustin. In their review, they found suspicious messages involving 3 teenagers who were arrested a week after the crime on February 22. The arrested individuals were 18-year-olds Tyrell Bredernitz and Samantha Grigg, and 16-year-old Brendan Heim. Samantha was arrested in her car, which was believed to have also been used in the commission of the crime. Thus, it was confiscated for a thorough examination. Upon inspection, traces of blood were discovered in the vehicle, supporting the police's belief that the deceased, Dustin, had been in that car. In Samantha's car, police found a folding knife that may have been used in the murder. When she was arrested, there was a strong smell of marijuana inside the vehicle. During the search, officers also discovered other banned substances, items belonging to the victim, and musical equipment. The other 2 suspects were arrested at their own apartments. All 3 teenagers were connected through their high school. Investigators found messages on their phones revealing that all 3 were involved in the events leading to the death of Dustin, a rising rap star. Samantha was a talented singer in a local rock band and had recently performed at the Summer Festival in 2012. She was known for her vibrant personality and rebellious spirit. Phone records indicated that she began communicating with Dustin a few weeks before he died. The investigation suggested that Samantha, along with the other teens, attacked Dustin to steal his banned substances. After the assault, they left him to die on the road. During the investigation, it was found that the criminals had destroyed most of the evidence by burning it. They drove out of town to dispose of the incriminating items, which made it impossible for investigators to find anything at the crime scene that indicated a murder had occurred. As a result, they could not accurately piece together what had happened. Despite this, there was enough evidence to charge the 3 teenagers with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit armed robbery. Each faced a potential life sentence for these charges. After interviewing them, investigators gathered enough evidence to detain the juvenile offenders. All 3 were charged with the specified crimes. Samantha was the first to accept a plea deal, pleading guilty to involuntary manslaughter and robbery without a weapon. In exchange for a lighter sentence, she agreed to testify against her accomplices, Brendan and Tyrell. This not only helped reduce her sentence, but also opened up the possibility of her being released early on parole. A key condition of her plea was that she had to provide truthful testimony about her accomplices. On the evening of February 15, Samantha received a call from Brendan. He asked her to give him and Tyrell a ride to East Lansing to break into Dustin's apartment. She simply agreed to drive them and planned to wait down the street for their return. However, when they arrived, they found no money in Dustin's apartment. Instead, they brought Dustin to Samantha's car and drove, stopping at ATMs so he could withdraw cash. At first, the situation seemed calm and non-violent, but as they neared Dustin's home, Brendan attacked him from the back seat, beating him severely. Dustin quickly realized he needed to escape. He jumped out of the moving car, which was traveling at about 100 kilometers per hour, after enduring several heavy blows to the head. He likely believed this desperate act was his only chance for survival. Samantha stopped the car, but not to help Dustin. Her accomplices got out, searched him, took his banned substances and around $800, and then kicked him. Afterward, the criminals drove away, leaving Dustin without any assistance. Samantha was paid $100 by the assailants to cover her gas costs for her involvement in the crime. The prosecutor stated that this plan had been detailed out on February 14 during a party. Although Samantha was not at the party, her friends called her and proposed that they attack Dustin. Under pressure from her friends, she agreed to go along with the dangerous scheme. At first, they described their intentions as vandalism and robbery, and nobody mentioned the plan to kill Dustin. The situation escalated only because he jumped out of the car. The lawyer claimed that until that point, Samantha had no significant legal issues. She was a student, a talented singer, and had the potential for a successful career in music. However, her true character was far from flawless. In addition to her involvement in the murder and robbery, police discovered banned substances and prescription medications in her car, indicating that she also struggled with substance abuse. Shortly before her legal issues began, Samantha had an audition lined up with a prestigious music company. However, because of the incident, she ruined her chances for a future career in music. During the trial, the defendant apologized to the family of Dustin, who were present in court, she admitting that she was the driver while Brendan and Terrell carried out the other criminal acts. Although she expressed regret, the victim's family did not believe in her sincerity. They felt that her role in the murder was just as important as that of the others, since she could have helped the victim or persuaded her friends to abandon their harmful plan. By not speaking up, she allowed this tragedy to unfold. At this time, Samantha could have called for help after separating from her friends if she had felt fearful of them. And if that had happened, Dustin might still be alive today. Instead, she chose to remain silent, resulting in a mother losing her son and a 10-month-old girl losing her father. When this was mentioned in court, Samantha nodded in agreement and wiped away her tears. Samantha shared her plans for after serving her sentence, expressing her desire to attend college to study music and promote her artistry while helping young people develop in the music industry. This only caused further pain for Dustin's family, who harshly criticized Samantha for depriving him of his future opportunities. The victim's family demanded the harshest punishment for Samantha's accomplice, even though it had not been proven that she was directly involved in the murder. Before the sentence was handed down, the judge read letters from concerned individuals. Some expressed that they believed Samantha should receive leniency, while others wanted her to spend her life in prison. One fan of Dustin even wished for Samantha to suffer eternally. Ultimately, Samantha was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 6 years. The victim's family agreed with this punishment, but hoped for a harsher sentence for Samantha. The prosecution, supported by the victim's family, believed her involvement in the crime was too serious for her to be forgiven and released. Samantha's best hope was to apply for parole when she turned 24. In contrast to Samantha, other accomplices faced more severe legal challenges. Tyrell was already known to law enforcement, who had visited his apartment at least 8 times in the 14 months before the murder. Each time, he could have been charged with minor offenses, but he managed to escape punishment. On December 3, 2013, Terrell was sentenced to 93 days in confinement for attempting to steal approximately $200 worth of property. The judge chose to give him a conditional sentence, hoping to avoid ruining his future. However, by January 13, 2014, he was back in court for multiple probation violations. Although the judge could have extended his sentence, he decided to wait until the next hearing on February 24. During the time between these court appearances, Tyrell committed a serious crime by killing Dustin. This incident sparked significant debate and anger. Many argued that if the judge had not been lenient with Tyrell, he would have been in jail, and Dustin might still be alive. The judge later explained that he wanted to give Tyrell a chance to change, believing he could reform with guidance. Unfortunately, it became clear that Tyrell was a danger to society, and this realization came too late, after the tragic death of Dustin. Interestingly, on February 12th, only 3 days before this incident, a woman living in the apartment below him had contacted the police about him. That evening, she noticed the wind pushing trash onto her balcony and saw someone tossing it from the window above. When she went outside to check, she saw Tyrell and his friends at the window. She complained to Tyrell, who responded by throwing a beer bottle at her, narrowly missing her head. This incident alone could have landed Tyrell in jail for violating the terms of his probation. Immediately after that, the officers assigned to investigate juvenile delinquency visited his apartment to look into the situation, but no one answered the door. The officers then returned to their patrol car nearby to wait for Tyrell to come out. However, he did not appear that day. The charges against him were not serious enough to justify forcing the door open and arresting him. Consequently, the officers left without taking any action. A few days later, Dustin was murdered. The police returned to question Tyrell, who initially denied any involvement. However, he later changed his story and agreed to cooperate with the prosecution in exchange for a lighter sentence. Tyrell confessed to second-degree murder as part of a plea deal and also agreed to testify against his accomplices, shifting the blame onto his friend Brendan. Tyrell explained that Brendan had planned to rob Dustin from the start and intended to attack him. Tyrell was in the car with Brendan and Samantha when he witnessed Brendan pull out brass knuckles and begin hitting the victim, who was in the front passenger seat. After the attack, Dustin jumped out of the moving car and sustained fatal injuries. The car came to a stop, and the assailants got out to search for valuables on Dustin's body. Although Dustin was critically injured and still alive, they chose not to help him to avoid getting caught. Tyrell claimed that Brendan instructed him to abandon the victim. Instead of offering assistance, they took some of Dustin's clothing, searching for money and valuables, including his shoes, and then fled the scene in Samantha's SUV. Tyrell Bredernitz was sentenced to 38 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years, meaning he could apply for parole as early as age 43. 16-year-old Brendan Heim also accepted a plea deal after admitting to first-degree murder. Despite being the youngest involved, friends testified that he was the ringleader of the crime. Brendan revealed that on February 14, he planned the murder with 2 friends at his home. Their goal was to take Dustin, whom they knew had money, to several locations so he could withdraw cash from ATMs. It was Brendan's idea to start tormenting the victim in the car, and he quickly began to physically assault Dustin. Brendan expressed sorrow to the victim's family, but could not explain what drove him to commit the act. The investigation revealed that his mother had planned to seek help from a psychiatrist because she was concerned about his aggressive behavior. She and his father had observed that Brendan was acting unpredictably and wanted to ensure his well-being. However, his parents acted too late. Brendan Heim, who is 16 years old, received the most severe sentence, 60 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 32 years. The youngest participant in this crime was incarcerated as soon as he turned 18. Dustin's parents satisfied with Tyrell and Brendan's sentence, but believed that Samantha's punishment was too lenient. They struggled to understand the senseless nature of the crime, which had destroyed their lives and the lives of everyone who loved the victim. To this day, all those involved in the crime remain in prison. The case of Rachel Barber. The story from 1999 in Australia. Rachel Barber was born on September 12, 1983, in a small town in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. She is the eldest of 3 daughters. Rachel's parents, Mike Barber and Elizabeth, lived in a middle-class neighborhood, and the girl grew up in a very loving and close-knit family. From a young age, Rachel had a deep love for classical music and a passion for dance. Her parents decided to enroll her in a ballet class. After a few lessons, they were convinced of her talent. To support her creativity, they set up a makeshift studio at home where Rachel could continue her lessons. As time went on, Rachel transformed into a beautiful young woman. She had a slender body and was popular among her friends, but despite this, she was quite shy and reserved. Her commitment to dance made it difficult for her to keep up with her schoolwork, and she worried that her academic struggles would hinder her progress in dance. This concern led her to ask her parents to allow her to transfer from her regular high school to a dance academy called Dance Factory, where she could fully focus on her passion for dance. Her parents supported her desire to pursue her passion. After enrolling in the dance academy, Rachel quickly made close friends and met Manny Corella, a fellow dancer with whom she felt an instant connection. Their romantic relationship blossomed, and their peers affectionately referred to them as Romeo and Juliet. Rachel's life was busy and filled with a schedule, but this was not a problem for her since she was doing what she loved. Every morning, one of her parents took her to the local tram stop. From there, Rachel traveled to meet her boyfriend and friends, and together they headed to the academy. After classes, they would regroup and take the tram back, where Rachel's father would pick her up for the ride home. Rachel's life seemed idyllic. She was young, attractive, popular, supported by a loving family and a caring boyfriend. On the evening of Sunday, February 28, 1999, while the Barber family was having dinner together, Rachel received 2 phone calls, but did not disclose who she was speaking to, downplaying their significance. This moment marked a turning point for her. On March 1, 1999, the day started off like any other for the Barber family. Rachel woke up early, got ready, and left for the academy. Her father, Mike, drove her to the tram stop, promising to pick her up that evening at 6:15 p.m. After hugging her father goodbye, Rachel met her boyfriend and her friends at the next stop, and they all headed to the academy together. Excitedly, Rachel told her friends that she would earn a significant amount of money that evening. Although they pressed her for details, she insisted it was a secret and that she couldn't share more. Given Rachel's appearance, her friends speculated that she was involved in modeling work. During their lunch break, Rachel and her boyfriend Manny visited a nearby shopping center, where she paused in front of a shoe store to admire a pair of shoes she had wanted for months but couldn't afford. She entered the store and asked the salesperson to hold a pair of shoes for her so she could return the next day to buy them. Manny pressed her again to share details about a mysterious job and whom she would be working with. But Rachel only mentioned that she would be meeting an old acquaintance that evening who had found her a well-paying job. Manny found it odd that she had so many secrets, but despite his persistent questioning, Rachel remained tight-lipped. She reassured her boyfriend not to worry, claiming it was nothing significant and posed no danger. When class ended, the group gathered as usual to head to the tram stop and go home, but Rachel said she would take a different route this time to meet someone. She hugged Manny, promised to call him that night when she got home, and then left. Concern arose when Mike arrived at the tram stop at 6:15 p.m. and noticed that his daughter was missing. This was unusual for him, as Rachel was typically very responsible. Trying to remain calm, he assumed she might be late for the tram and chose to wait for her. However, as time went by without any sign of Rachel, his worry grew. Elizabeth, Rachel's mother, also began to feel anxious when neither her husband nor her daughter returned home for dinner. At 7:40 p.m., Michael called Elizabeth to inform her that Rachel was missing. They were extremely worried because Rachel had a fear of the dark, stemming from previous incidents where two men had followed her home. The parents decided to contact the police for help. The police dismissed the concerns of Rachel's parents, telling them that not enough time had passed to file a missing person report, suggested that their daughter might just be protesting and had run away temporarily. The police advised them not to worry and to go home and wait. However, her parents knew their daughter well and were certain that she would never behave in such a way. Their family communication was open and casual, and Rachel felt comfortable discussing anything with her parents. Rachel's parents sensed something was wrong and decided to search for Rachel themselves. They first reached out to her boyfriend and her friends from the academy. Manny informed Rachel's parents about a mysterious job-related meeting she had that night, which they were completely unaware of. They also learned that Rachel had not taken the tram with her friend. Alarmed by this new information, the parents went to the police station, but were ignored again. The next day, Rachel still had not been heard from, so her parents and friends began to search the entire city. They spoke to people, distributed flyers with her photo, and pursued every possible lead, no matter how small. Unfortunately, their efforts seemed fruitless, but they did not give up. Rachel's loved ones organized search groups, and many volunteers joined in. News of the missing young dancer spread quickly, and it wasn't until the third day, as the case gained public attention, that the police finally decided to assist. The first suspicion that arose with the police was regarding Rachel's boyfriend, but he had a very convincing alibi, so he was excluded from the list of suspects. Finally, a crucial lead emerged. A former student from Rachel's academy reported seeing her with another young woman at the tram stop on the night she went missing. The witness shared that she traveled on the tram with them and overheard their conversation, which sounded perfectly normal for two young girls. She also noted the specific station where they got off, mentioning that Rachel stood out because she looked well put together, while the other girl appeared more casual. The police were able to confirm this information by checking surveillance footage from the tram stop. The investigators' next step was to examine the Barber family's phone records, particularly from the days leading up to Rachel's disappearance. They discovered something. On the night before she went missing, Rachel received 2 calls from a former neighbor, who was also the family's nanny, Caroline Reed Robertson. They had lost touch with her 5 years ago. This revelation brought a sense of calm to the Barber family. They began to believe the police's theory that Rachel had run away with Caroline for reasons unknown to them. At least this makes them believe that Rachel is still safe. The investigators revealed that Caroline worked as a mobile phone operator in Melbourne. When the police investigated her workplace and found that the day after Rachel's disappearance, Caroline went to work, but everyone could see that she was very upset and pale, so they sent her home. On the following day, she called in sick but still came to work to collect money owed to her by a colleague. Caroline explained that she needed the money to pay for a truck. Investigators also learned that she had applied for a bank loan during that time, but was denied. Following these findings, the detectives decided it was important to speak with Caroline's father, David Reed. David shared that when he learned about his daughter's epilepsy, he went to visit her. Initially, Caroline refused to let him inside the apartment. When Caroline finally allowed him in, the bedroom door remained closed the entire time. On March 12, 1999, the police obtained a search warrant for the apartment. When they entered, they found Caroline unconscious on the floor of her room, apparently having suffered an epileptic seizure. They called an ambulance and rushed her to the hospital. Besides, they discovered clothing that was not Caroline's size, and they were struck by the numerous photographs of Rachel plastered on the walls. They also found writings, notes, and several intimate diaries. While the contents of these diaries seemed harmless at first, they later uncovered something disturbing within the entries. That evening, when Caroline woke up, the investigator immediately asked her about Rachel's whereabouts. Her response was unexpected and shocking. she coldly stated that Rachel was dead. The investigator couldn't accept what he had just heard and asked her again if she was sure. He wondered if there was still a chance to save Rachel. Caroline confirmed it was too late, stating that she had killed Rachel and buried her on the family farm next to her pets. Following Caroline's directions, the police went to the site and discovered Rachel's body in a decomposed state, with a computer cable around her neck. This revelation left everyone in disbelief, especially the Barber family, who were devastated to learn they had lost their young daughter, particularly at the hands of her former nanny. Caroline lived near the Barber house and came from a wealthy but troubled family. Throughout her life, Caroline battled depression stemming from feelings of inferiority and her parents' indifference. She has epilepsy, obesity, and acne, which worsened her already low self-esteem. At school, she faced bullying, which made her increasingly withdrawn and fueled her self-hatred. In her teenage years, she began writing in a diary, chronicling her internal struggles and disappointments. She expressed thoughts like, "I don't belong anywhere in this crazy world because I am ugly, fat, and have a horrible face. I am a rarity." At 14, she drew a self-portrait highlighting her negative self-image, surrounded by words like loser, unwanted, dirty, fat, useless. In other words, she grew up despising herself, and her situation worsened significantly with her parents' divorce. Afterward, Caroline desperately sought her father's approval and support, writing him heartfelt letters about her struggles. Unfortunately, he did not respond with understanding or sympathy, nor did he visit her. Meanwhile, her mother, Gail, concerned about Caroline's issues and noticed her unusual behavior. Gail grew closer to Rachel's mother and confided in her. When she learned about Caroline's challenges, Elizabeth suggested that Caroline see a specialist for help. However, Caroline's mother felt powerless to assist her daughter. It was in this context that Caroline joined the Barber family. From the start, she realized that their family was very different from hers. There was a sense of love and happiness. Meeting Rachel, then 10 years old, she felt that this girl had everything Caroline wanted but couldn't have. In Caroline's eyes, Rachel was perfect. This admiration sparked a dark obsession and jealousy within Caroline toward Rachel. Caroline aimed to gain the Barber's trust, which she accomplished by being hired multiple times to care for Rachel and her younger sisters. During this period, she began writing in her diary about Rachel, portraying her as a model for self-improvement. Caroline's troubled mindset led her to see Rachel as entirely positive, fueling her desire to emulate her and attain what Rachel had. However, her efforts to achieve this were unsuccessful for a while, especially after Caroline's family moved away. Despite this, she continued to pursue her obsession with Rachel, documenting everything in her diary. It was possibly at this point that she started to develop a dark plan. Her fantasy evolved into a calculated scheme. Wishing to be like Rachel was no longer sufficient. She felt she needed to become Rachel. To achieve this, one of the two girls had to disappear. In early 1999, Caroline reached out to Rachel with an offer for a reputable modeling job. However, Elizabeth intervened, stating that her daughter was too young to work as a model. Undeterred, Caroline tried again, hoping for a better outcome. On the eve of her plans, she called Rachel to persuade her to meet. Caroline meticulously detailed her intentions in her diary, outlining every step to ensure success. For example, she wrote about poisoning a pizza with sleeping pills and instructed Rachel to claim she couldn't discuss their meeting due to confidentiality regarding a psychological study. Other disturbing entries described plans to drug Rachel with illegal substances, hide her body, alter her appearance, and dispose of her. One entry included reminders to check the farm on Tuesday, arrange a bank loan for a move, disguise her hair, clean the house thoroughly, and wash the carpet. These notes led investigators to conclude that Caroline acted with premeditation, having planned everything in advance. Just as planned, Caroline misled Rachel by promising her good payment to take part in a psychological evaluation, but insisted that Rachel keep it a secret. Trusting Caroline, Rachel did as she said. In her testimony, Caroline mentioned that she couldn't recall all the details of the incident but remembered meeting Rachel at the train station and then taking a tram to her apartment. Once inside, Caroline drugged Rachel with sleeping pills. The next thing she remembered was strangling Rachel with a computer cable. Afterward, she concealed Rachel's body in her closet for 2 days while she dealt with moving arrangements. A man who helped her move verified this. He remembered transporting furniture and an object wrapped in bags, and Caroline had advised him to be careful with it because she claimed it was a statue. According to her records, it was revealed that Caroline planned to escape to a new location and start fresh with a different identity. Caroline also detailed the new persona she wanted to create, which included having the same birth date as Rachel. At one point, she asked Rachel's sister for Rachel's birth date to help her obtain a birth certificate and falsify the birth date on it. Caroline portrayed her new identity as a young, rebellious girl with facial features similar to Rachel's. She attempted to secure a bank loan to start a new life, but was denied. Caroline Robertson was charged with Rachel Barber's death on March 13, 1999, and remained in custody until her trial in November 2000. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving a minimum of 14 years. The judge described Caroline's actions as malicious, stating that she took Rachel's life to pursue an excessive dream, motivated by jealousy of Rachel's beauty and individuality, believing that this would lead to her own success and happiness. However, the judge also noted that Caroline had a personality disorder that influenced her behavior and indicated that she posed a real danger to anyone who became the focus of her intense attention. 3 years after the incident, Elizabeth published a book called The Perfect Victim, which recounts her daughter's story. In 2009, a film about the case was released. While in prison, Caroline began a romantic relationship with another inmate. She became eligible for parole in 2013, but the Barbers, Rachel's parents, protested her early release, leading to a postponement of the decision in subsequent years. Ultimately, Caroline was granted parole in 2015. The Barbers are uncertain about her rehabilitation, but hope that authorities will monitor her behavior once she is free. Caroline's appearance had changed significantly since her incarceration, and her lawyer noted that she had transformed her behavior during her time in prison. He mentioned that she felt happier than ever while incarcerated. An innocent young girl lost her life due to circumstances over which she had no control. A troubled, unstable person mistakenly believed that taking the lives of others would grant her the qualities she envied, and that beauty was the path to happiness. Caroline clearly needed psychological help, which was evident through her behavior within her family. Unfortunately, the help she needed did not arrive in time, resulting in a tragic outcome. The case of Raynella Dossett Leith. Raynella Dossett Leith was born on October 25, 1948, in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, a small, isolated town originally established for workers at the nearby nuclear power plant. Her parents worked at the plant, and because the town was isolated, it was safer than many other American cities. Children were free to play outside. Raynella was a bright student and did well in school. She successfully enrolled at East Tennessee State University in Knoxville, where she studied nursing. There, she met a very ambitious young man named Ed Dossett, who aspired to become a corporate executive or start his own business, and even had political ambitions. He was a quiet, friendly young man, and they both grew up in rural Tennessee. In 1970, the young couple got married and moved to the suburbs of Knoxville. Ed Dossett owned a large old family farm that they renovated with the help of contractors, turning it into the perfect home. After graduating from college, Raynella began working as a nurse at a local hospital and worked her way up to the position of senior nurse. By 1975, she had completed her law degree and begun a successful legal career. In 1978, when the Knoxville County Attorney General retired, Ed Dossett ran for the position and was elected. Raynella played a major role in his success, as he credited much of it to her support. In 1978, the couple welcomed their first daughter. In 1983, they had a son, followed by another daughter in 1985. After learning that she was pregnant with her first child, Raynella decided to quit her job and become a full-time housewife, as her husband had a good income, and she also helped with the farm work. During this time, Ed Dossett served as the Knoxville County Attorney and worked with a secretary named Kay Clift Walker, with whom he had a secret affair. Although Kay had a family of her own, they still spent weekends and holidays together. When Kay became pregnant, she had to quit her job due to her increased responsibilities, but her intimate encounters with Ed Dossett continued. In such a conservative county, having an extramarital relationship was unacceptable for a public servant. Ed Dossett and Kay chose to end their affair to avoid damaging their reputations. However, the situation was more complicated than it seemed. Those who knew Raynella recognized her as a controlling and powerful person. People often did not enjoy interacting with her, let alone befriending her. Ed Dossett's close friends and family knew that his marital problems began soon after they got married, largely due to Raynella's desire to control every aspect of their lives. Many later understood why Ed Dossett decided to leave. During a meeting, Ed Dossett began to experience severe stomach pain. His assistant noticed that he was constantly holding his stomach and seemed unwell. When asked about his health, Ed Dossett expressed that he believed his wife was trying to harm him, implying that she was poisoning his food. However, when offered help, he insisted that he could handle it on his own. By September 1991, his condition had worsened to the point that he had to be hospitalized. Although he was skeptical of his wife's intentions, he later revealed that these fears were unfounded. Doctors performed a series of tests and discovered a malignant tumor in his small intestine and liver. Unfortunately, the cancer was already at an advanced stage, with metastases spreading to nearby organs in the abdominal cavity. Ed Dossett returned home anxiously and shared his diagnosis with Raynella. He later confided to family members that she responded calmly to the news but chose not to discuss the illness. She believed it was better to keep the situation private, thinking it would allow her husband to continue working for as long as possible. She felt that staying active would help prolong his life, and secretly hoped for a miracle that would aid in his recovery. Those who knew Raynella well speculated that her motives were financial, believing she pushed him to work until the end to maintain a steady income. By March 1992, Ed Dossett's health had declined significantly, and it was clear he was losing the battle against his illness. During this time, he wanted his family close, so he contacted loved ones, including his cousin, with whom he had a close relationship until the end of his life. The cousin lived in another state and drove over 700 kilometers to visit Ed Dossett. Raynella refused to let his cousin into the house, leaving him no choice but to leave. That evening, Raynella wrote a letter explaining her actions, claiming that Ed Dossett's serious condition made it impossible for him to receive visitors anymore, and that his appearance might scare them. However, no one found this explanation convincing. Just a few days later, Ed Dossett himself asked his family to visit him one last time, indicating that he did not care about his appearance. The next day, Raynella insisted that Ed Dossett return to work. Despite being in excruciating pain and barely able to move, Ed chose to follow his wife's wishes and continue working until the very end. After only one day of work, he was forced to stop. Now bedridden, Ed Dossett was on near constant morphine to manage his unbearable pain, and doctors estimated he had only a few weeks to live. No one expected anything unusual to happen to Ed Dossett, who was in critical condition and required medical assistance to stay alive. On the morning of July 9, a 911 call was received requesting police and paramedics to Raynella's home for assistance. When the police arrived, they found Raynella in a panic, running around the body of Ed Dossett, who was lying on the ground. Raynella explained that her husband had gone out to check on their cattle. After a while, she heard noises indicating that the cattle were agitated. She tried to call out to Ed Dossett, but there was no response. Fearing he had been trampled by the frightened animals, she grabbed her pistol and fired several shots into the air to scare them away. Initially, the police believed the incident to be an accident. Raynella was taken to the police station for standard questioning. However, as the conversation progressed, her account of her husband's death began to raise suspicions. During the questioning, the police learned that Ed Dossett had a serious illness and had suddenly wanted to check on the cattle, which seemed odd given his poor health and difficulty walking. The police were puzzled as to why Raynella had allowed him to go alone to the herd in such a weakened state, and why she had shown no concern when he took so long to return. Raynella remained in the house until she heard a loud noise, at which point she discovered her husband lying on the ground. Ed Dossett had been trampled and was covered in scratches and hoof marks. Raynella administered first aid and CPR. Having worked in a hospital, she was well versed in these techniques, but unfortunately, nothing seemed to help. As her story unfolded, more bizarre details emerged. Realizing her husband was beyond saving, she called for emergency services, but there was no response. She tried to contact the local hospital directly, but she did not remember their phone number. The police found this suspicious, as she had worked as a senior nurse at a local health center for many years and should have known the number by heart. Despite the inconsistencies, her account was considered credible. She explained that she had not been working for the organization for long and had forgotten the necessary phone numbers. She also mentioned feeling scared and shocked. Eventually, she contacted the local market director, a friend of hers, and asked him to call for help. He then reached out to the emergency services. Unfortunately, the condition of the body made it difficult to determine the cause of death at first glance, so a thorough autopsy was required. Forensic experts arrived to investigate the scene, but they found no physical evidence. Ultimately, Ed Dossett's death was ruled an accident, and the case was closed. However, the real story was just beginning. Those who knew Ed Dossett well realized that in his final days, he was barely conscious for more than a few minutes due to constant pain and required injections of morphine to relieve it. It was strange that he suddenly decided to leave the house to check on the cows. If he tried to stand, he could barely do so on his own. His legs had weakened in the last days of his life. The medical examiner found numerous internal injuries and broken bones on the man. Furthermore, there were hoof marks on his skin, which corroborated Raynella's story. Ed Dossett's relatives knew that his life insurance policy included a clause that doubled the payout if he died in an accident rather than from natural causes such as cancer. Although his wife would still receive a payout, it would be significantly less. Therefore, it was in her best interest to present her husband's death as an accident. Since the authorities classified his death as an accident, she could collect double the compensation. This is why Raynella initially tried to hide her husband's illness from the police. Ed Dossett's relatives decided to investigate the circumstances surrounding his death. Discovering inconsistencies in the case, Ed Dossett's blood had almost no morphine, which was surprising given his regular use of high doses. He had terminal cancer and could only manage his pain with large amounts of painkillers. The forensic expert confirmed that the morphine level was 0, indicating that he had not taken any medication for at least a day. However, it seemed that Ed Dossett could not move without painkillers. Despite this, the official inquest was closed. It is believed that Ed Dossett may have staged his own death, as he was nearing the end of his life and wanted to go on his own terms. Perhaps he was worried about his family and considered this his last wish. But it is difficult to understand why he did not at least take a painkiller to alleviate his suffering before staging this incident. All of this creates a confusing picture with contradictory details. At the funeral, Ed Dossett's friends confirmed their suspicions about Raynella. Eyewitnesses noted that she seemed carefree and even cheerful, which was surprising for a grieving widow. Rather than mourning her husband, she appeared to treat the event as a social gathering, mingling and chatting with guests. This behavior was especially strange given her usual rudeness toward others following her husband's death. It seemed that she had finally been relieved of the burden of caring for him. She had not worked for a long time, had received a large sum of money, and felt no need to find employment. Instead, she chose to spend most of her time with her children. However, Raynella soon grew tired of this lifestyle. She and her children began visiting a nearby swimming pool owned by a man named David Lead. David was a well-known figure in the local community. He was married and had a daughter. Raynella and David had little in common. Raynella was well educated, while David had dropped out of school at 19 without graduating. He eventually became a hairdresser and opened his own beauty salon, gaining recognition in town. David was always proud of his appearance and underwent several cosmetic surgeries to look younger. Unfortunately, his satisfaction with his looks did not last long. One day, an accident caused a large piece of debris to hit his eye, disfiguring his face and leaving him partially blind. Since then, he has worn sunglasses. As Raynella and her children spent more time at the pool, they grew closer to David. He began an affair with Raynella, which his wife eventually discovered. She filed for divorce, but by then, David was deeply in love with Raynella and indifferent to the divorce proceedings. They quickly divorced, and in January 1993, Raynella married David. He moved to her farm just 6 months after Ed Dossett's death, which sparked new rumors and gossip in the community about her marrying her late husband's friend, especially considering the suspicious circumstances surrounding Ed Dossett's death. The situation became a real scandal. Initially, she and David ignored the questions and gossip, but eventually, the rumors died down. Soon after, she began to display her domineering and harsh personality. David's daughter, who had seen him driving his pickup truck in a bad mood, asked her father what had happened. He told her that he had argued with Raynella, but did not want to share more details. His daughter was shocked, as it was the first time she had seen him like that. In 1994, a heartbreaking tragedy struck Raynella. Her son died tragically. He and his sister had been driving with a temporary license that allowed them to drive as long as a licensed adult was present. However, that day, the boy was driving without adult supervision, lost control of the car, and crashed into an oncoming vehicle. The boy, who was not wearing a seatbelt, was thrown through the windshield and suffered serious injuries, dying before the ambulance arrived. Raynella was taken to the police station for questioning after the incident. Several witnesses stated that there were no adults in the car when the boy was driving, but Raynella claimed she was in the car with the children and that the tragic accident happened before she could react. Despite this, the police believed Raynella's story and chose not to prosecute her. If the case had been thoroughly investigated, Raynella could have faced consequences that could have prevented further events from occurring. However, her persuasive speaking skills helped her avoid further legal trouble. Following these events, divorce proceedings began between Kay Clift Walker, Ed Dossett's former secretary, and her current husband, Steve Walker. Her husband was shocked to discover that their second child with Kay was actually Ed Dossett's. Raynella, who knew about the affair, contacted Steve to discuss the situation. The day after they met, she requested another meeting to discuss important documents. Raynella invited Steve to her farm to review the documents confirming the paternity of all of Kay's children with Ed Dossett. In a shocking turn of events, Raynella pulled out a loaded pistol and began attacking Steve. Fortunately, he dodged the bullets and escaped unharmed. Steve considered calling the police for assistance, but Raynella acted first and called them herself. In a panic, she falsely claimed that Steve had brought a weapon to her home and threatened her. The police quickly discovered the truth, leading to Raynella being charged with attempted murder. After a preliminary hearing, she was released on $200,000 bail. Raynella later accepted a plea deal, which resulted in a sentence of 6 years of probation and 100 days of community service. Meanwhile, Raynella continues to research her inheritance after David's death. His daughter, who was only entitled to 10% of the estate, was supposed to inherit the house and the rest of the estate. In January 2000, David began to suffer from various health problems, including hallucinations, high cholesterol, and even a stroke. Raynella handled the situation by preventing family members from visiting David and limiting contact with his daughter and their nephew. Fortunately, David recovered and was discharged from the hospital, but his health problems forced him to quit his business. By this time, he was showing signs of dementia. During a visit to a neurologist, he vaguely recalled an incident involving suffocation with a pillow, but the neurologist dismissed it as another hallucination. On March 13, David's mother was hospitalized for cancer. Unexpectedly, Raynella visited her at the hospital and then contacted David's daughter, asking her to visit her father. She expressed that she had left a plate of food and medicine on the bedside table, but was worried that David might not finish eating. It was unclear why she suddenly became so anxious, and how she knew he had even touched the food. The call was strange because, in recent months, Raynella had done everything she could to limit David's daughter's contact with her father and prevent them from communicating. Additionally, she had never visited her mother-in-law, so her appearance at the hospital took everyone by surprise. David's daughter then went to the house to check on her father, but no one answered her phone calls or opened the door. She eventually found David with a head injury and quickly called the police. When the police arrived, they found Raynella immediately discussing her decision to end David's life. She insisted he had good reasons for this, citing his long-term battle with depression. However, David loved his daughter very much, and his mental health seemed stable because he was managing his illness well. Raynella told the police that on the day he died, she had left him food on the bedside table before visiting her mother-in-law. Before leaving, he had spoken to her and kissed her goodbye. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it, but now she realized that was his way of saying goodbye to her for the last time. Raynella claimed that David's actions constituted a voluntary departure from life, but she also mentioned that it was the first time she had seen a weapon. However, given her dubious past full of lies and contradictions, few believed her. There were some strange details in this case. At the crime scene, 3 shots were fired. The first missed, the second was fatal, and the third also missed David. Additionally, 1 shot came from a different type of weapon that was not found at the crime scene. David was wounded on the left side of his head, despite being right-handed and having lost most of his vision in his left eye due to a previous traffic accident. This suggests that he would have struggled to aim accurately at that part of his head. David's family believes that Raynella was responsible for the murder. It seemed that the Raynella might eventually be brought to justice, but she acted quickly by arranging for the cremation of her second husband, David. This move destroyed much of the evidence that could have been used in court, making it impossible to conduct a proper autopsy. David's daughter was devastated by her father's death, and even more shocked to discover that he had left her virtually nothing. Despite efforts to bring the police into the case, 3 years passed without any progress. Raynella manipulated those around her with her money and status, and she lied to the police several times. Finally, in 2006, when David's daughter realized that she could not obtain justice through government agencies, she decided to hire a private investigator. Her goal was to seek justice and prevent Raynella from gaining an undeserved inheritance from David. She was certain that her father would never do this to her. It was all a setup. Private investigators uncovered clear evidence of Raynella's guilt, leading to the reopening of the official investigation into David's death. The police finally took the evidence against Raynella seriously and thoroughly examined the cases surrounding the deaths of her 2 husbands. The toxicology report on Ed Dossett's death revealed an error. In fact, there was a dangerously high level of morphine in his system, which could have been fatal. With such a high concentration of the painkiller, he would not have been able to move, let alone care for his cows. In 2006, Raynella was charged with the murder of Ed Dossett. It became clear that his death was no accident. She had discreetly contacted a funeral home and paid for her second husband's cremation, raising suspicions that she was trying to hide the evidence. As a result, Raynella faced charges of premeditated murder. However, she portrayed herself as the victim, convincing several people in the process and manipulating the trial in her favor. Raynella did not plead guilty to the murder. She was released on $5,000 bail, and her formal trial was set for March 2009. The jury was unable to reach a unanimous decision, with only one juror believing she was innocent, while the others believed she had planned to kill her husband for financial gain. As a result of this impasse, the case was retried in 2010. During the retrial, experts revealed that the bullet that killed David Leith was fired from a distance of at least 30 centimeters, too far for a suicide attempt. David did not have the arm length necessary to wield a weapon at that distance. Fingerprints found on the murder weapon also suggested that the scene had been staged after the crime. Raynella visited David's mother at the hospital to establish an alibi. She tried to contact David's daughter, locate her father, and call the police. The prosecutor argued that David had been given a cocktail of drugs typically used for surgical patients, which only nurses had access to. On January 25, 2010, after 2 days of deliberations, a jury found Raynella Dossett Leith guilty of first-degree murder for David's death. She was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 50 years. Shortly after the verdict, charges related to the death of Raynella's first husband, Ed Dossett, were dismissed for reasons that remain unclear. In early 2011, it was discovered that the verdict had been entered while the judge was a drug addict, which may have influenced the outcome. On the plus side, David's will was found to be invalid because his illness had impaired his mental capacity. As a result, half of the estate was confiscated, and Raynella returned David's assets to his daughter. Her lawyers attempted to appeal the case, but their efforts were unsuccessful. The defense continued to fight and achieved a breakthrough in January 2017, when Raynella returned to court. The prosecution argued that Raynella's murder plan fell apart when she fired the first shot, which dramatically changed the situation. The second shot was believed to be the fatal one. David's daughter testified that Raynella had been acting strangely and unusually on the day of the incident. The prosecution contended that Raynella's odd behavior was an attempt to create an alibi for herself. Steve Walker, Kay's husband, who had been attacked by Raynella earlier, also spoke at the trial. He stated that Raynella clearly intended to kill him, and even shouted about her intentions. He believed that he was only saved by luck. He was furious that Raynella had escaped punishment and that she believed she could act without consequences. It appeared that Raynella picked up the weapon again and attacked her second husband. To further support her claim that David had taken his own life, the defense brought an expert into the courtroom. The defense expert demonstrated to the jury how David Leith could have fired all 3 shots. Ultimately, the judge acquitted Raynella Dossett Leith, stating that there was no evidence to prove her guilt. She noted that no blood or gunpowder residue was found on David's body, and that Raynella had an alibi for the time of his death because she was in the hospital. There was no evidence to prove that Raynella committed the crime or that she was the last person to see David alive. The defense celebrated the verdict, while the prosecution and jury were disappointed. Raynella, who has repeatedly evaded the justice system, remains free. Now 76, she lives on her farm, and no one dares to question her about the deaths of her 2 husbands. Her children support her. Unfortunately, it seems the truth about these tragic deaths will never be discovered, but many believe she was directly involved in the deaths of both husbands. The case of Sarah Scazzi. Sarah Scazzi, 15, lives with her family in the small town of Avetrana, Italy, which has a population of about 6,000 people, all of whom are closely connected and know each other. Sarah is known to be an energetic and cheerful girl, full of vitality that often surpasses that of her peers, and she is very kind. On August 26, Sarah had a meeting scheduled with her cousin, Sabrina. They had planned to go to the beach with their friends. Since they lived close to each other, Sarah only had to walk about 600 meters to Sabrina's house. She left early to arrive by 2 p.m., following her usual route through a quiet area, which typically took about 10 minutes. However, this time Sarah was late, which was unusual for her. They had planned to meet early to wait for their friends and prepare for the trip, and her tardiness worried Sabrina. At 2:42 p.m., 2 other girls came to see Sabrina, but Sarah was still missing. Sabrina told her friends that she had tried calling Sarah several times, but her calls and texts went unanswered. To prove her concern, Sabrina made several more calls, but all were unsuccessful. The situation worried the girls. It seemed that Sarah might be in danger, and they needed to find out what had happened. They decided to follow the path Sarah had taken. When they arrived at her house, they saw no sign of her along the way. It appeared that she had disappeared. At home, Sarah's mother confirmed that her daughter had left more than an hour ago and was supposed to be at Sabrina's house by now. The worried mother followed her daughter's usual route, but found no signs of where she might have gone. After several hours without hearing from Sarah, the mother decided to contact the police. Fortunately, the police quickly began searching for Sarah, starting in a limited area. They checked for traces and then expanded the search area, but found no evidence of a struggle, assault, or kidnapping. Meanwhile, the police spoke to people close to Sarah, including family, neighbors, classmates, and other members of the community. They explored every possible clue. Initially, it seemed that Sarah might have been kidnapped for ransom, and the criminals had completely covered their tracks. However, this theory was soon dismissed. Sarah came from an ordinary family, raised by a single mother, while her brother worked as a bricklayer. It was unlikely that such a financially struggling family would attract the attention of kidnappers. The next theory considered the possibility that Sarah had run away. However, Sarah had no reason to run away. She had a good relationship with her family and friends. Nevertheless, the police persisted in their investigation and found Sarah a month and a half later, on October 6, 2010. Her body was discovered at the bottom of a well in the rural area of Avetrana. An autopsy revealed that she had been strangled, with significant marks on her neck. Initially, the investigation was hampered by a lack of clues. Family members were unaware of any conflicts Sarah had with others. She did not appear to have any enemies or anyone who would want to harm her. Sarah avoided illegal drugs and other negative influences. In an effort to gather information, the police reviewed her social media pages but found no valuable clues. Her accounts appeared normal for a teenager, with very few photos and posts. Sarah's mother gave her diary to the police, hoping it would help solve the mystery of her daughter's death. The diary contained intriguing information, and Sarah confided in her. In 2010, 15-year-old Sarah was in high school and became close friends with 20-year-old Sabrina Misseri, a cosmetologist. They shared many common interests, especially in the beauty industry, which Sarah wanted to pursue. They kept in regular contact until a man named Ivan Rusa came along. Sabrina quickly developed feelings for him and tried to get closer to him. However, feelings also developed between Ivan and Sarah. The warmth they felt for each other did not escape Sabrina's notice, and she became jealous. Sabrina and Sarah often argued, and just before the murder, they had another serious conflict in front of several witnesses. During this confrontation, Sabrina accused Sarah of being interested in Ivan. This accusation affected Sarah deeply, especially because it happened in front of others and quickly became a rumor. As the rumors about Ivan and Sarah spread, the relationship between Sabrina and Sarah deteriorated. In her diary, Sarah mentioned that Sabrina was very angry that night and that she had never seen Sabrina like that before, which made her feel scared. This anger could have created a strong motive for the crime. Did Sabrina really strangle Sarah out of jealousy and resentment? The police interviewed several witnesses, including friends who were part of the group that Sarah was supposed to go to the beach with. Through their accounts, along with information from Sarah's family, they pieced together the events that led to her final hours. On the morning of August 26, Sarah and Sabrina had planned to go to the beach after lunch with some of their friends. According to Sarah's mother, she quickly went shopping to prepare for the outing. When Sarah returned, she quickly ate lunch, changed, and left the house around 1:30 p.m. Sarah was preparing to go to Sabrina's house, but once she left, no one saw her again. At 2:42 p.m., friends arrived at Sabrina's house, and she tried to call Sarah back when they arrived but was unsuccessful. At this time, a forensic expert determined that Sarah had been strangled with an unknown object, possibly a belt about 2 meters long. The estimated time of death coincided with the time she was expected to arrive at Sabrina's house. The police interviewed 2 friends who were supposed to be going to the beach with Sabrina and Sarah and discovered some interesting information. When the 2 friends arrived at Sabrina's house, they found her waiting on the porch. This was uncharacteristic for her, as she usually waited for guests inside the house. Sabrina tried to stall for time and prevent them from entering. She quickly claimed that Sarah had not arrived yet. Pretending to be worried, she called Sarah's phone in front of the girls to support her story and create an alibi. During the first call, the phone rang, but no one answered. During the second call, the phone was turned off. Sabrina's feigned worry raised suspicions. The police stated that there might be more people involved in this crime than initially thought. At the well where Sarah's body was found, the police discovered tire tracks and collected fingerprints. It turned out that the tire tracks matched the grooves of Sabrina's family's car. A strange detail emerged. The timing of the evidence being destroyed and the body being dumped coincided with the time when all the girls went to Sabrina's house. Further investigation revealed that Sarah's uncle, Michel Misseri, who was also Sabrina's father, was responsible for disposing of the body. As the events unfolded, Sabrina strangled Sarah. She had little time to hide her actions, so she asked her father, Michel, to help dispose of the body. Unable to refuse Sabrina, he decided to throw it down a well. Nearby, a fire pit was found, where some of Sarah's personal belongings, including items taken from their home, were discovered. Michel attempted to destroy the evidence by burning them in the fire. Sabrina and her mother, Cosima Serrano, then became actively involved in the search for Sarah. They appeared on several television shows to announce Sarah's disappearance and seek support. This was just one of many deceptive tactics used by the criminals. They spread numerous false clues to distract the investigation. On October 6, 2010, Michel's mental state deteriorated, and he confessed to killing his niece, Sarah. Michel stated that he killed her in the garage. However, the police found his story to be inconsistent from the beginning. During the reconstruction, Michel could not demonstrate how he strangled Sarah, and his actions did not match her injuries. Michel testified that he asked to be intimate with Sarah, but she refused, which angered him. He then attacked, abused, and killed her. However, the medical examiner found no evidence of abuse, which further cast doubt on his confession. Michel took responsibility for the murder, attempting to protect his daughter, Sabrina. Meanwhile, the police gathered evidence suggesting that at least 2 people were involved in the crime. The question is who the second person. For a long time, Sabrina's mother, Cosima, did not raise any suspicion, despite her unusual behavior in television interviews. Forensic examination results showed that Sarah did not resist during the murder, suggesting that the attack was sudden or that there were at least 2 attackers, one of whom restrained her. It was shocking to discover that Sabrina's entire family was involved in the murder, as confirmed by their phone conversation on October 4, 2010. Several days after Michel gave Sarah's cell phone to the police, Sabrina learned about the incident. She called her mother, expressing her fears about leaving fingerprints on Sarah's phone while staging the calls. They also discussed potential evidence left in the house and behind the garage where the murder was believed to have occurred. However, it was unclear who actually strangled Sarah during their conversation. To investigate further, the police decided to track the cell phones of all the suspects. It is surprising to learn that Cosima was in the garage at the time of the murder. It is possible that she held Sarah down, preventing her from defending herself. The day after the murder, Cosima and Sabrina went to the area where Sarah's body was later found in a well. They claimed that they were visiting a local vineyard owned by another daughter of the family, but this explanation seems unlikely. The vineyard was too far away, and they did not actually go there. Instead, they were near the well and later near where Sarah's personal belongings were burned. Evidence suggests that they knew about the body. Witness testimony indicates that Sabrina reacted unusually coldly to Sarah's murder, which is surprising given their previously close relationship. The case attracted considerable attention in the town, leading to alarming rumors. Sabrina's neighbor claimed that he saw Cosima dragging Sarah from the backyard and hiding her body in the trunk of her car. Sarah died at the same time that her friends were on their trip to Sabrina's house. She met them on the outside on the porch, trying to keep the girls from entering the house to prevent them from discovering what was happening in the backyard. The trial began on January 10, 2012. However, the hearings lasted much longer than expected, with several adjournments and new evidence emerging throughout the proceedings. It was known that Sabrina was keen on developing a relationship with Ivan Rusa, which made her jealous of Sarah. In his testimony, Ivan spoke about his relationship with Sarah, mentioning that she considered him a father figure and sent him a photo to show off her new hair color. He maintained a friendship with Sabrina. The prosecution presented a clear and accurate account of the tragedy, despite the efforts of Sabrina's family to cover up the crime. Sabrina and Cosima were later convicted of the murder of Sarah Scazzi. On April 20, 2013, the court sentenced Sabrina Misseri and Cosima Serrano to life in prison. Michel Misseri was sentenced to 8 years in prison for concealing evidence. Although he accepted responsibility for Sarah's death, he had only intentionally concealed the body and destroyed evidence. Sabrina and Cosima were unhappy with the verdict, prompting their defense attorneys to file an appeal, which was accepted. The new trial began on November 16, 2014. During the preliminary hearing, the court determined that both suspects would remain in prison for the duration of the trial. Michel claimed that he alone was responsible for Sarah's death. asserting that neither Sabrina nor Cosima were involved in the crime. However, by this time, the prosecution had gathered enough evidence to prove that Michel had only intentionally concealed the body and destroyed evidence. He wanted to protect his family, so he took all the blame upon himself. On July 27, 2015, an appeals jury upheld the life sentences for Sabrina and Cosima, ensuring that they would spend the rest of their lives in prison. Since the criminals never admitted guilt, it is difficult to determine the exact motive behind the murders. However, given their recent relationship, the motive may have been jealousy over a man.